Tonight we enter a quiet room filled with broken clay from a vanished civilization. In the 19th century, excavators working among the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia uncovered libraries buried beneath collapsed palaces. Thousands of clay tablets emerged from the earth, their surfaces covered with wedge-shaped marks pressed by hands long forgotten. Among those recovered writings were fragments describing a struggle over something called the Tablet of Destinies. Scholars eventually recognized that this was no ordinary object within Mesopotamian mythology. Whoever possessed it appeared to hold extraordinary authority over decisions established within the divine world. Yet one surviving story contains a detail far stranger than simple kingship or command. A stolen tablet seems able to make creation reverse itself. That strange possibility is where your journey begins. Archaeologists working at Nineveh uncovered parts of the royal library assembled under King Ashurbanipal during the 7th century before the Common Era. The collection preserved myths, rituals, medical writings, royal records, and scholarly texts copied from traditions already centuries old. Modern institutions, including the British Museum and major university collections, continue studying these fragments because many survive incomplete. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And wherever you are listening tonight, share your location and your local time below. There is something comforting about imagining distant listeners entering ancient Mesopotamia beneath entirely different skies. Now the room becomes quieter. You can almost smell the dry clay. Imagine holding one of these tablets beneath the weak light of an oil lamp. Its surface is small enough to rest comfortably between your hands, yet its signs preserve voices from several thousand years ago. A scribe once pressed each symbol carefully into wet clay, probably never imagining someone from your world would study it. The tale preserved upon these fragments concerns the storm creature Anzu and the warrior god Ninurta. Different forms of the tradition survived across Mesopotamia, and scholars continue debating how its versions developed through changing periods and cities. The central crisis begins with authority. The great god Enlil possesses the Tablet of Destinies, an object associated with divine decisions and legitimate command. Anzu watches him closely and becomes fascinated by the power represented by the tablet. Eventually he takes it. The consequences are immediate. The divine world does not simply lose a valuable treasure. Its established order becomes unstable because Anzu has seized something connected with the authority to determine outcomes. That idea feels strangely familiar. Mesopotamian societies depended heavily upon written administration, especially as cities became larger and institutions grew more complicated. Clay tablets recorded grain distributions, property transfers, labour obligations, offerings, debts, marriages, and royal decisions. Written words could organise lives. A sealed document might determine who owned a field, who owed silver, or which temple received barley. The divine world imagined by Mesopotamian scribes often reflected this environment of offices, decrees, witnesses, and carefully maintained records. Yet the Tablet of Destinies moves beyond ordinary administration. In the Anzu story, Ninurta eventually confronts the thief and attempts to defeat him with weapons. What happens during this struggle has fascinated readers because Anzu appears capable of commanding those weapons to undo themselves. The imagery is remarkable. Parts of the weapon are ordered back toward the natural materials from which they originated. Wood returns toward vegetation. Feathers are directed toward birds. Components that human craftsmanship had joined together appear to lose their manufactured identity. Creation seems to unravel. Not everything about these passages is perfectly secure, because surviving manuscripts differ, and ancient expressions allow competing interpretations. Assyriologists therefore debate the precise force of several commands and how literally ancient audiences imagined them. Still, the underlying scene remains extraordinary. Ninurta launches humanly understandable technology against an enemy possessing divine authorization. Anzu responds not merely by blocking the attack, but by challenging the completed state of the weapon itself. The weapon has a history. Once it was separate material. Someone gathered those materials, shaped them, combined them, and gave them a new purpose. The tablet seems connected with a command that pushes those relationships backward. For a modern listener, the temptation is obvious. You might picture some impossible machine capable of rewriting matter, almost like a device restoring objects to previous conditions. Fringe writers occasionally take the idea much further, describing the tablet as lost technology or an ancient control system. There is no archaeological evidence proving that interpretation. The surviving texts belong within a religious and literary world where divine speech itself possesses enormous power. God's command wins, establish kingships, determine boundaries, and impose order through decisions that humans cannot imitate. Yet the unusual language still deserves attention. Why describe the weapon returning to their constituent origins? A storyteller could simply have said that Anzu was protected from arrows. Instead, the tradition preserves something more elaborate and philosophically unsettling. An object can apparently cease being what it became. Consider that thought slowly. A wooden shaft is not merely destroyed, it remembers the tree. A feather does not simply fall, its identity points backward towards the bird. The crafted object appears vulnerable because its present form may not be permanent within divine reality. Somewhere beneath what something is lies the memory of what it once was. That interpretation does not require forgotten machines or hidden laboratories. It grows naturally from a culture where creation itself could be understood through divine ordering. The mystery becomes deeper when destiny enters that picture. Today, destiny often sounds personal. You might imagine fate determining whom someone marries, when someone dies, or whether someone becomes fortunate. Mesopotamian ideas could be broader. Divine decrees might concern cities, kingships, temples, cosmic functions, and the proper place assigned to beings within an ordered universe. Destiny could therefore mean something closer to an authorized condition of existence. The tablet may symbolize authority over those conditions. Scholars disagree about how literally the object should be understood within individual compositions. Some emphasize royal ideology, while others focus upon divine assembly, cosmic sovereignty, or the literary symbolism of written command. No single explanation removes the mystery completely. That uncertainty matters. It prevents you from turning ancient poetry into modern science fiction too quickly, yet it also prevents the story from becoming merely decorative mythology with nothing unusual beneath its surface. The scribes chose their imagery carefully. Their world was filled with tablets carrying decisions. Their gods also carried decisions. One governed ordinary obligations between people, the other imagined authority extending into the structure of reality itself. For a moment, the difference becomes surprisingly thin. You sit beneath that imagined oil lamp as the clay rests silently nearby. Outside, the rivers move through darkness. Irrigation canals glimmer beneath stars, and distant temple walls rise above sleeping houses. Somewhere within that civilization, a storyteller speaks about a stolen object. It grants no simple wish. It does something stranger. It seems to challenge whether a created thing must remain in its present form. And if divine authority could command something to return toward what it had once been, another quiet question begins forming. Perhaps the true mystery of the Tablet of Destinies is not whether it predicted the future. Perhaps it concerned who possessed authority over the conditions that made any future possible at all. Your feet meet packed earth as the imagined landscape widens beneath a pale Mesopotamian sky. Heat settles over the plain before midday. gathering against mud brick walls and open courtyards. Beyond the city, irrigation channels cut narrow lines through fields of barley, while date palms stand near the water like patient sentries. Nothing here feels permanent. That is part of the illusion. To the people living within these cities, temples, walls, canals, houses, storehouses, and administrative offices form the dependable architecture of existence. Yet almost everything is built from materials that slowly surrender to rain, wind, flood water, and neglect. Mud brick returns easily to mud. You pass through a gateway where merchants, workers, priests, farmers, and officials move between crowded streets. Sand gathers along the edges of walls, donkeys carry baskets. Somewhere nearby, grain is being measured into standardized containers, while a scribe watches carefully. Writing is everywhere that administration matters. Researchers at institutions such as the University of Oxford and Yale University have spent generations examining the economic and legal tablets recovered from Mesopotamian settlements. These records confirm that written documentation became deeply woven into urban life. A shipment could be recorded. A worker could receive a ration. A field could be assigned. A debt could survive longer than the person who first remembered it. Clay became memory. The strange durability of this system begins with something very ordinary. Wet clay is plentiful, inexpensive, and easy to shape. A trained scribe presses signs into its surface using a reed stylus. Some tablets remain soft and reusable. Others dry as Still others become accidentally fired when buildings burn, leaving destruction to preserve what peaceful centuries might have erased. There is a quiet irony here. Fire destroys the room. Fire saves the archive. You move toward a temple complex rising above surrounding houses. Its walls are thick, and its entrances regulate movement carefully. These institutions are not merely places where people gather for private devotion. They control land, labour, livestock, storage, workshops, offerings, and enormous quantities of food. A temple may employ brewers, shepherds, textile workers, gardeners, administrators, musicians, cooks, and scribes. Religious authority and economic organisation sit beside each other, without the modern boundary you might expect. The gods have households. Their households require accounting. A deity receives clothing, food, drink, incense, and ceremonial attention through the work of human attendants. The divine image occupies sacred space while an entire institutional world develops around its needs. This arrangement helps explain something easily missed by modern readers. Cosmic order does not float somewhere above practical life. It is expressed through schedules. Offerings occur at particular times. Festivals follow calendars, personnel hold assigned roles, land belongs to institutions, storage rooms contain measured goods. The sacred world has procedures. That may sound almost disappointingly bureaucratic until you imagine the alternative. If the correct offerings fail, if boundaries collapse, or if legitimate offices become confused, disorder begins entering places where stability once seemed guaranteed. A missing record can create tension among humans. A missing divine authorization carries greater consequences. Walk deeper into the administrative quarter. The air smells of dust, reed matting, oil, and grain. Shelves and baskets hold tablets grouped according to purpose. Some may contain transactions that matter for only a few months, or others preserve decisions meant to endure. The placement of tablets itself remains an important subject of archaeological study. Excavators often find texts in secondary contexts because buildings collapsed, archives were cleared, or later inhabitants moved older material. Scholars still debate how neatly ancient archives were originally organised and how much surviving archaeological arrangement reflects later disturbance. That uncertainty changes the way you imagine discovery. An archaeologist does not usually open an untouched room containing a perfect library arranged by topic. More often, fragments emerge from the complicated layers where centuries of rebuilding have mixed human intentions together. One wall stands upon another. A floor covers an older doorway. Broken tablets fill foundation. The city becomes a stack of forgotten decisions. At sites such as Ur, Nippur, Uruk, and Nineveh, excavations reveal just how densely written culture could accumulate. Legal documents, lexical lists, prayers, omens, myths, school exercises, and administrative accounts sometimes survive within the same broader urban landscape. This does not mean everyone can read. Literacy requires training. Young scribes learn signs through repetition, copying lists, practicing names, and memorizing conventional forms. The work can be tedious enough to make modern homework seem almost charitable. Some school tablets preserve repeated signs written with varying confidence. You can almost see the student's patience thinning. One quirky interpretation, sometimes suggested by modern enthusiasts, imagines temple archives as ancient equivalents of centralized information networks, with scribes functioning like human processors inside an enormous system. The comparison can be playful. It can also mislead. There is no evidence of machinery hiding behind Mesopotamian administration, yet the metaphor captures one genuine feature of these cities. Information creates power, because institutions depend upon reliable records. Who owes what? Who owns this? Which family holds that field? Which official received the grain? What did the king decree? A written answer can settle disputes that memory cannot. Now imagine that same instinct projected into the divine realm. If human society functions through assignments, seals, offices, witnesses, and records, then the universe itself might also possess established arrangements. A god governs storms, another oversees wisdom, another protects a city. Their powers are distinct. Their authority has structure. Mesopotamian myths frequently portray divine assemblies in which important decisions are discussed or confirmed. Kingship can be bestowed, cities can gain favour, catastrophe can be permitted. The universe feels administered. This is not merely a metaphor imposed by modern historians. It reflects a culture where political and religious legitimacy often depend upon recognised authority. A ruler does not simply declare himself acceptable, he requires divine support. A temple does not simply stand because someone built walls. Its ceremonies establish relationships between community, deity, and city. Even boundaries possess meaning. You leave the archive and step into a courtyard where sunlight reflects from pale walls. Somewhere above, birds should circle through the heat. Somewhere below your feet, older foundations sleep beneath newer construction. The city seems solid, yet every surface conceals another layer. That may be the most useful image for understanding Mesopotamian destiny. Nothing begins with the individual alone. Every person enters a world already arranged by family, city, temple, ruler, occupation, property, obligatory, and divine expectation. Identity exists inside a network of assigned relationships. To disturb one relationship can affect another. To remove the authority guaranteeing them threatens much more than a single decision. Night eventually cools the bricks. Oil lamps appear behind doorways, and the daytime noise slowly thins. Records rest in storage rooms while officials sleep, yet the claims written upon clay remain. Fields still belong to someone. Debts still exist. Offerings are still expected. The written word continues working in silence. Perhaps this helps explain why Mesopotamian imagination could grant such weight to a divine tablet. A tablet is small enough to carry. Its consequences need not be. In a civilization where a few lines of clay could transfer land, confirm authority, record obligation, or preserve a royal command, the idea of cosmic decisions taking written form would not feel absurd. It might feel inevitable. And beneath the quiet roofs of the ancient city, destiny begins to resemble something less like fortune and more like an order carefully entered into the records of existence. A cool reed stylus rests between a scribe's fingers while damp clay waits beneath his hand. The room is dim, but not silent. You hear sandals shifting against packed earth, the scrape of baskets, and the muted voices of officials checking quantities nearby. Nothing in this setting resembles a throne room, yet authority is being created here. A few marks can change ownership. A few more can establish obligation. Writing does not merely describe reality, it helps decide which version of reality will be recognized. That distinction matters enormously in Mesopotamia. As cities expand and institutions become more complicated, memory alone cannot carry every agreement safely. Land passes between families, workers receive rations, and temples manage estates. Rulers issue commands across territories larger than any single official can personally supervise. The written tablet becomes an extension of authority. Researchers at institutions including Yale University and the University of Oxford have shown how administrative texts illuminate the machinery of early Mesopotamian government. Thousands of surviving documents reveal societies where decisions become increasingly attached to records, witnesses, formulas, and recognized procedures. You can feel the importance of that system in something as ordinary as a field boundary. Two families may remember the edge differently. A witness may die. A generation may pass. But a written document can preserve an agreement beyond the people who first made it. Clay acquires a peculiar kind of power, not magical power, social power. A decision becomes harder to ignore when it has been fixed into material form. Kings understand this instinct very well. Royal inscriptions proclaim victories, construction projects, offerings, and acts of justice. Law collections present rulers as guardians of order. Boundary stones and legal tablets preserve claims that are meant to outlast spoken argument. The world of the gods reflects similar concerns. Divine decisions are often imagined as things that can be established, assigned, or confirmed. A god may receive authority over a domain. A city may be granted prosperity. A ruler may be chosen for kingship. Such decisions possess weight because they come from recognized divine authority. Destiny, in this environment, does not need to mean an invisible thread pulling an individual toward an unavoidable ending. It can mean an appointed condition. Something has been decided. Something has been assigned. Something now occupies its proper place within an ordered structure. This helps explain why destiny becomes so closely associated with writing. A royal decree does not create stone, grain, or human beings from nothing. Instead, it determines relationships among things that already exist. This field belongs here. Field belongs here. That worker owes labour there. This temple receives those animals. That ruler possesses legitimate authority. The decree arranges the world. A divine decree can be imagined on a larger scale. The difference is not necessarily in form, but in reach. Human documents regulate houses, land, debts, marriage contracts, and institutional responsibilities. Divine decisions concern cities, kingships, natural forces, and the boundaries between order and chaos. Your fingers brush the imagined edge of a clay tablet. Its surface is modest. Its implications are not. Mesopotamian texts sometimes portray gods as assembling to deliberate, rather like councils of powerful rulers. Their decisions can determine matters that no human court could overturn. This does not mean the gods operate like bureaucrats carrying baskets of paperwork between celestial offices. The image is more subtle. Human institutions provide a language for the imagining cosmic authority. A king has advisors. A A temple has officials, a household has responsibilities. A divine assembly has rank, privilege, and decision. The universe begins to resemble a kingdom whose stability depends upon proper authority. That idea carries a gentle menace. If order depends upon legitimate assignment, then disorder may begin when assignments are violated. A god acting outside an allotted role becomes dangerous. A ruler without divine approval becomes unstable. A sacred object connected with cosmic decree becomes valuable for reasons deeper than ornament. Some scholars have compared Mesopotamian concepts of destiny with the establishment of fixed portions, roles, or functions rather than simple prediction. The exact meaning changes across texts, periods, and languages, which keeps the discussion open. There is no single ancient definition waiting neatly inside a dictionary. That uncertainty is useful. It reminds you that ancient thought is rarely as tidy as modern summaries make it appear. Scribes inherit traditions, reshape stories, borrow older expressions, and adapt ideas to changing political worlds. Destiny can therefore feel personal in one composition and strongly political in another. It may concern a king. It may concern a city. It may concern a divine office. It may concern the stability of creation itself. A strange modern theory sometimes treats these divine decrees as if they were literal programming instructions in an ancient technological system. In that reading, the gods become operators and cosmic tablets become devices controlling reality. There is no archaeological basis for such machinery. Still, the comparison attracts attention because it captures an uncomfortable feature already present in the mythologies. Ancient Mesopotamian order often behaves as though reality depends upon authorization. That does not make it computer code. It does make it structured, and structure can fail. Imagine entering a royal court while a decree is being prepared. The ruler speaks. Scribes record the decision. Witnesses acknowledge it, and a seal confirms legitimacy. Once completed, the document becomes more than clay. It carries the authority of the person whose decision it preserves. Someone holding the tablet does not automatically become king. Yet possession matters because the object embodies recognized command. This distinction may help you understand why divine tablets can be stolen without making every thief automatically legitimate. Power and rightful power are not identical. A rebel may seize a crown. A usurper may occupy a seat. A thief may capture a royal seal. Each possesses an instrument of authority, without necessarily possessing the social recognition that made it legitimate. Mesopotamian stories repeatedly explore this tension. Who has power? Who deserves power? Who has been appointed? Who merely took what belonged to someone else? Those questions would have felt painfully familiar in a region where dynasties rose. Cities rebelled, armies invested votes, and kings justified themselves through divine favour. Political instability gives theological language a sharper edge. A ruler who claims that the god selected him is not simply making a religious statement. He is explaining why his command should be obeyed. A temple hymn praising divine order may also reinforce earthly hierarchy. A myth about destiny can therefore carry several meanings at once. It can be theological. It can be political. It can be philosophical. It can even be administrative in its imagery. The boundaries blur quietly. You hear the stylus again. A scribe presses one final sign into the clay and sets the tablet aside. The decision has now taken physical form, small enough to hold but durable enough to survive dynasties. Perhaps that is the quiet genius behind the image of written destiny. Writing allows an invisible decision to become visible. It gives authority a body. A spoken command vanishes into air. A written command remains. And if humans can preserve their decisions this way, It is easy to understand why their gods might do something similar on a scale large enough to govern kings, cities, and creation. The Tablet of Destinies becomes less mysterious in one sense. Its symbolism grows clearer, yet clarity introduces a more disturbing possibility. If destiny is something established like a decree, then existence itself may depend upon remaining within the conditions that divine authority has recognized. A person, city, weapon, or kingdom does not simply continue because time moves forward. It continues because its present state belongs to an accepted order. And somewhere within the imagination of ancient Mesopotamia, written authority stands quietly beside reality, deciding what may remain as it is. You enter a world where divine authority has a center, and that center belongs to Enlil. His presence does not depend upon spectacle. He does not need to cross the sky in fire or shake mountains whenever he wishes to be noticed. Within many Mesopotamian traditions, Enlil simply occupies a position that others recognize. His authority feels settled. That quality makes him dangerous. Enlil belongs among the most important gods of ancient Mesopotamia, especially within the religious life of Nippur. His great sanctuary there, known through archaeological excavation and ancient texts, became one of the most prestigious sacred centers in the region. Kings sought his approval. Cities respected his temple. Rulers at all who controlled distant territories still invested heavily in Nippur because religious legitimacy could travel farther than military banners. You can picture the city beneath a white afternoon sky. Dust moves through narrow streets. Animals wait beside walls. Priests cross courtyards where sunlight falls sharply against baked brick. Above ordinary houses rises the sacred precinct. The temple does not merely contain a statue. It represents a point where political ambition, divine favor, ritual obligation, and ancient tradition meet. Researchers from institutions including the University of Chicago have spent generations examining Nippur and its written remains. Their work confirms that the city held religious importance across many centuries, even when political power shifted elsewhere. That endurance matters. A capital can move. A dynasty can vanish. A sacred reputation can survive. Enlil's position reflects this older kind of authority. He is repeatedly associated with command, kingship, and the determination of great matters. In literary compositions, assemblies of gods may gather beneath a hierarchy where his decisions carry immense weight. He does not rule simply because he is physically strongest. He rules because cosmic authority has been concentrated around his office. That difference becomes essential. A powerful warrior can defeat enemies. A legitimate sovereign can decide what counts as order. You hear distant footsteps passing through the imagined sanctuary. The sound changes against stone thresholds and plastered walls. Somewhere incense burns, leaving a bitter sweetness suspended in warm air. The atmosphere suggests control rather than chaos. Everything has a place. Offerings arrive according to custom. Ritual specialists perform designated duties. Temple personnel maintain routines developed across generations. The divine household appears orderly because human hands keep reproducing that order. Enlil stands at the summit of a similar arrangement among the gods. Ancient compositions do not always present the divine hierarchy identically. Different cities elevate different deities, and political changes reshape religious emphasis over time. Scholars continue debating exactly how centralized Mesopotamian theology ever became, since local traditions remain powerful and sometimes preserved competing arrangements. That disagreement prevents a simple diagram. The gods are not pieces permanently fixed upon one board. Their rank can change with place, period, and text. Yet Enlil's prestige remains difficult to ignore. Kings invoke him in inscriptions. Hymns celebrate his authority. Myths treat his decisions as matters capable of affecting entire populations or To possess something belonging to such a god means touching power at its institutional centre. This is where the Tablet of Destinies becomes more than a mysterious magical object. It belongs inside a system of rank. Imagine a royal palace. A ceremonial seal rests near the king. Its material may be stone, but its significance does not come from the stone itself. The seal matters because people recognize what it represents. It confirms decisions. It authenticates documents. It tells officials that a command belongs to the established ruler. A divine object can operate symbolically in a similar way. The Tablet of Destinies may represent the formal authority through which divine decisions become binding. This does not mean Enlil needed to consult it like a Kevitz clock checking instructions. Ancient mythology is rarely that mechanical. The tablet expresses something larger. It makes sovereignty tangible. You can almost feel its weight in your hand, though no surviving archaeological object has been identified as the legendary Tablet of Destinies. That absence has encouraged unusual speculation. Some modern enthusiasts have imagined the tablet as a portable machine, a coded device, or even a lost instrument capable of controlling natural laws. The idea is colourful. Archaeology does not support it. No excavated object from Mesopotamia has demonstrated technology resembling such claims. The tablet belongs securely within a mythological environment where divine symbols carry powers unavailable to ordinary humans. Yet the symbolism itself remains fascinating. Why place cosmic authority in something portable? A mountain cannot easily be stolen. A storm cannot be tucked beneath a wing. A tablet can. That narrative choice introduces vulnerability into the structure of a divine rule. Enlil may possess legitimate sovereignty, but the symbol carrying that sovereignty exists separately enough to become an object of desire. Power can be approached. Power can be watched. Power can be taken. For a Mesopotamian audience, this tension may have carried political resonance. Royal courts depended upon guarded spaces, trusted servants, official insignia, and controlled access to rulers. The closer someone stood to the centre, the more dangerous betrayal became. An outsider approaching a palace invites suspicion. A servant already inside does not. Authority often fears the hand nearest the throne. You move through Enlil's imagined residence and notice how much depends upon proximity. Doors regulate access. Courtyards separate visitors by status. Attendants move where strangers cannot. Sacred architecture teaches hierarchy without speaking. One threshold says you may enter. Another says you may not. The god himself occupies the most restricted space. This pattern appears repeatedly in Mesopotamian temples, where movement towards divine presence becomes increasingly controlled. Archaeologists and historians continue studying exactly how different temple rooms functioned, because architectural interpretation can remain uncertain. Still, restricted access clearly matters. The nearer one approaches sacred power, the fewer people belong there. That simple fact turns guardianship into something more than physical protection. It becomes protection of order. Enlil guards not merely an object, but the authority represented by that object. His possession declares that decisions belong where they have been legitimately placed. You may find a strange parallel in the behaviour of ancient kings. Some rulers carried ceremonial weapons or seals whose practical usefulness mattered less than their symbolism. Modern people do something similar, although usually with less incense. A crown does not make someone intelligent. A signature does not make someone wise. Yet societies attach extraordinary consequences to recognize symbols. Mesopotamian religion magnifies that. Principle. If earthly kings require visible signs of legitimacy, a god-ruling cosmic order can possess one as well. The tablet therefore stands at an uneasy boundary. It is physical enough to be handled. It is symbolic enough to represent authority. It is divine enough to affect reality. That combination makes it uniquely dangerous. Night settles gradually over Nippur. The heat loosens its grip on the walls, and the last movements in the temple complex grow quieter. Lamps tremble behind doorways while the surrounding city sinks into darkness. Inside the sacred imagination, Enlil remains seated within an established order. His authority appears complete. The roles of gods remain assigned. Kingship still carries divine approval. Boundaries still creation continues because the structure governing it remains intact. Yet even the most stable system contains a weakness when the authority becomes concentrated in something that can be possessed. The deeper mystery is therefore not simply what the Tablet of Destinies can do, it is why cosmic rule depends upon rightful custody. Perhaps Mesopotamian storytellers understood something timeless about power. Authority seems strongest when everyone accepts it. It becomes fragile when someone realizes that the symbols sustaining it can change hands. And in the quiet chambers of Enlil, where destiny rests close enough to touch, divine order suddenly feels less permanent than it first appeared. The air changes near the entrance to the divine chamber, where movement becomes quieter and every gesture seems measured. Anzu stands there. He is not yet the thief remembered by the story. He occupies a place close to sacred power, near enough to observe Enlil during moments that ordinary beings could never witness. That proximity matters more than strength. Ancient Mesopotamian art and literature preserve several great hybrid creatures, combining features of lions, birds, serpents, and other animals. Such beings often appear near boundaries, gates, divine spaces, or scenes of supernatural authority. Anzu belongs within this strange family. He is commonly imagined as a powerful bird-like being associated with storms, mountains, and violent atmospheric force. Some artistic traditions connect similar creatures with the body of a lion, and the head or wings of a great bird. Nothing about him seems ordinary, yet his most dangerous ability may be patience. You can imagine him remaining near the doorway while Enlil performs the routines expected of a divine ruler. Water is brought, ceremonial attention is given, the sacred chamber follows an order that seems too established to fail. Anzu watches. He studies where the Tablet of Destinies rests. He notices when it is handled. He understands when Enlil is least prepared to defend it. The story makes observation itself part of the danger. Researchers at universities including Yale University and the University of Chicago have examined different manuscripts of the Anzu tradition, showing how scribes preserved and reshaped the tale across centuries. The surviving versions do not give modern readers one perfectly uniform description of every event. Certain details shift. Names and emphases can differ. The central ambition remains clear. Anzu desires the authority associated with Enlil's position. His thought is not presented as a moment of madness. It develops through access, attention, and temptation. He sees power closely enough to imagine possessing it. That is an unusually human weakness for a supernatural creature. People often assume rebellion begins among outsiders, somewhere beyond walls where enemies gather in darkness. Ancient courts knew better. The person who understands a ruler's habits can be more dangerous than the person who attacks the gate. Servants know routines. Officials know procedures. Guards know vulnerabilities. Those nearest power often understand exactly when power is exposed. The ancient storyteller gives Anzu this unsettling advantage. He is close enough to see what others cannot. You feel the rough surface of a doorway beneath your fingers. Beyond it lies the quiet chamber of Enlil, heavy with ritual importance. The smell of oil mixes with dust. A vessel touches stone. Water moves softly. For a moment, the entire divine world seems contained within small domestic gestures. Then Anzu's attention fixes upon the Shadbeh. He does not merely admire it. He calculates. The surviving tale links his desire with kingship and the exercise of divine command. He appears to understand that control of the tablet could transform his position among the gods. This is where ambition becomes something colder. He wants more than treasure. Gold can enrich a thief. A sacred tablet can alter hierarchies. One unusual modern theory imagines Anzu as the guardian of a technological device who eventually decides to seize its operating controls. Enthusiasts sometimes describe the myth using language borrowed from machines, access systems, or lost technologies. No excavated evidence supports such a literal interpretation. Still, the comparison reveals why the story feels unexpectedly modern. Anzu behaves like someone who studies a protected system from inside. He observes its operator. He waits for weakness. He targets the object associated with authority rather than wasting strength against the entire structure. That is clever. Perhaps too clever. Mesopotamian audiences lived in societies where palace conspiracies, changes of dynasty, and struggles for succession were familiar realities. Kings surrounded themselves with officials whose loyalty could never be treated as completely automatic. Anzu's ambition therefore carries political weight. He represents the danger of unauthorized possession. A legitimate ruler receives authority through recognized divine order. A usurper attempts to capture the appearance and instruments of that authority without receiving the same recognition. Scholars still debate how strongly audiences would have read the Anzu myth as political allegory. Some emphasize its cosmic dimension, others give greater attention to kingship, rebellion, and the restoration of legitimate rules. The interpretations overlap without becoming identical. That uncertainty keeps the story alive. You do not need to choose only one meaning. Ancient myths often survive because they can hold several anxieties at once. Anzu may represent storm chaos threatening order. He may embody rebellion against established hierarchy. He may also express a deeper fear that authority can be separated from the person believed to deserve it. That final possibility is particularly disturbing. If divine sovereignty were inseparable from Enlil himself, theft would be impossible in any meaningful sense. But the story imagined something transferable. The tablet can move. Its power can accompany possession. At least temporarily, the wrong hands can make use of what belongs to the rightful ruler. Think about what this implies. A sacred system can recognize control without recognizing virtue. That is not the same as saying the tablet has mechanical functions. Ancient storytelling does not require such precision. Yet the myth allows stolen authority to produce real consequences. Anzu does not need universal approval before his possession matters. The cosmos responds anyway. This creates a subtle distinction between legitimacy and capability. A thief may lack the right to command while still gaining the ability to interfere. The two are not identical. In ordinary human life, the difference is familiar. Someone may steal a royal seal and issue a false order. The document remains fraudulent. But people who believe the seal may obey, the damage occurs before legitimacy is restored. Ancient Mesopotamian administration knew the importance of seals precisely because authentication mattered. Cylinder seals rolled across wet clay could identify individuals, offices, or institutions and help secure transactions. Their imagery was often beautiful. Their purpose could be painfully practical. A tiny carved stone might confirm an agreement involving land, livestock, or wealth. This provides an intriguing cultural backdrop for Anzu's obsession. Authority can be embodied in objects. Objects can be guarded. Objects can also be The divine realm magnifies the consequences. Anzu waits until Enlil enters the water. The moment feels almost ordinary. That ordinariness makes it effective. There is no army storming a gate. No city burns. No divine trumpet announces rebellion. A guarded object simply becomes vulnerable during a routine action. Anzu seizes his opportunity. Before that instant arrives, however, there is a final psychological detail worth lingering over. He has already crossed the dangerous boundary in his mind. The theft begins before his body moves. He has looked at the tablet long enough to imagine himself as its master. He has converted proximity into entitlement. Perhaps this is why the story places such importance upon watching. Desire grows through repeated attention. What seems unreachable becomes familiar. What becomes familiar begins to seem obtainable. And what appears obtainable eventually begins to feel deserved. The divine doorway grows again. Enlil remains within the chamber, surrounded by the rituals of established sovereignty. Outside, Anzu waits with the stillness of a creature who has already made his decision. Nothing has changed visibly. The gods retain their stations. The sacred order remains intact. The tablet of Destinies still belongs where it is supposed to belong. Yet a crack has opened inside the system. Not in stone. Not in heaven. Inside intention. Anzu has discovered that cosmic authority possesses a point of access. He has seen that even sacred power can become vulnerable during an ordinary moment. And in the hush beside Enlil's doorway, the universe stands dangerously close to discovering what happens when someone confuses access with the right to rule. The theft happens with almost frightening simplicity. Enlil lowers himself toward the water, setting aside the object that embodies his authority. The moment is brief, ordinary, and dangerously exposed. Anzu moves without hesitation. He takes the tablet of Destinies. Then he flees. The story does not describe a long struggle inside the chamber. There is no ceremonial challenge, no formal declaration, and no slow transfer of power. One moment the tableau belongs within the established divine order. The next moment it does not. You can almost hear the silence that follows. The disturbance is greater than the disappearance of a precious object. Something happens to the structure that depends upon the tablet. Divine functions weaken, command falters, and the gods experience a kind of paralysis. The language of the surviving tradition presents the crisis as cosmic. Authority has gone missing. That idea deserves careful attention. A stolen crown may humiliate a king, yet the kingdom can continue operating. A stolen treasure may wound royal prestige, but farms still produce grain and rivers continue flowing. The tablet of Destinies appears to matter differently. Its absence affects the ability of divine order to function. Researchers studying Mesopotamian literature at institutions such as the University of Chicago and Yale University have long emphasized the close relationship between divine authority, kingship, and cosmic stability. The gods are not simply powerful individuals wandering independently through the universe. They occupy roles. Those roles carry responsibilities. The stability of the whole depends upon the proper arrangement of the parts. When Anzu removes the tablet, that arrangement loses its center. The effect is almost administrative in its terror. Imagine entering a great palace at dawn and discovering that every official seal has vanished. The scribes are present, the guards remain at their posts, the storerooms are full, yet nobody knows which command can still be trusted. Orders arrive without confirmation. Messengers hesitate. Officials wait. A system that seemed enormous suddenly becomes fragile because legitimacy has been interrupted. The divine world experiences something similar, though on a far greater scale. The surviving Sochi describes a collapse of confidence among the gods. Their expected order is disturbed, and the theft becomes an emergency requiring immediate action. This reaction tells you something important about the tablet. Its power is not merely personal. If it only increased Enlil's strength, the other gods could simply continue their duties while he recovered from the loss. Instead, the theft affects them collectively. The tablet belongs to a shared system. Its disappearance threatens everyone inside that system. Mesopotamian myths often imagine the universe as something maintained rather than something permanently secure. Order must be protected through divine activity, ritual performance, kingship, and the proper maintenance of sacred relationships. Chaos is never entirely gone. It waits at the edges. Sometimes it arrives as floodwater. Sometimes it appears as rebellion. Sometimes it enters through a stolen object carried away into distant mountains. Anzu escapes toward a remote region associated with wildness and danger. The contrast is deliberate. The tablet leaves the controlled world of divine order and enters a landscape beyond familiar authority. You follow the imagined flight across dry ridges and shadowed valleys. Wind pushes dust against exposed rock, clouds gather above distant heights, and the open land feels increasingly empty. No temple walls rise here. No city gate defines belonging. No archive preserves agreements. The tablet now rests with a creature who has rejected the hierarchy that gave it meaning. That contradiction creates the central crisis. Anzu possesses authority without receiving consent. He holds the instrument but not the recognized office. Mesopotamian political history offers many human parallels. Cities changed rulers repeatedly. Dynasties replaced one another. Foreign kings occupied old capitals and immediately sought religious recognition from established temples. Military victory alone was rarely enough. A ruler wanted the gods to approve his kingship. He wanted priests to perform the proper rites. He wanted inscriptions to explain that his reign belonged within cosmic order. Power needed legitimacy. This is why Anzu's seizure feels so dangerous. He demonstrates that possession can imitate legitimacy long enough to create disaster. A curious fringe interpretation sometimes imagines the theft as an ancient description of a stolen command device, something capable of shutting down a wider system once removed from its proper location. There is no archaeological evidence for such machinery, yet the ancient narrative itself clearly treats the theft as more than symbolic embarrassment. Something stops working properly. That is the unsettling part. The gods must confront the possibility that the mechanisms of authority can be separated from the authority they were meant to serve. Scholars continue debating exactly what the Tablet of Destinies represents in different compositions. Some interpret it primarily as a symbol of kingship and supreme divine rule. Others emphasize the ability to establish decrees. Still others consider its role within broader traditions concerning cosmic organization. The ancient texts never provide a technical explanation. Perhaps that uncertainty is intentional. Mystery strengthens authority. A king does not need every subject to understand how royal power functions. He only needs them to recognize that certain objects, places, and words carry consequences. The same principle may operate in divine mythology. You stand within the imagined assembly of the gods as the scale of the crisis becomes clear. There is unease here. Here. Great deities who command storms, rivers, wisdom, fertility, and warfare suddenly confront a problem that individual powers cannot easily solve. The question is no longer whether Anzu committed theft. Everyone already understands that. The question is whether the universe can remain ordered while the wrong being controls the object associated with decree. That uncertainty produces fear. It also reveals something surprisingly fragile about divine hierarchy. The gods may be immortal, but their relationships still depend upon rules. They recognize offices. They honor ranks. They respond to established authority. Even among beings capable of supernatural acts, structure matters. Perhaps this is why the loss creates such profound stillness. A storm can be fought. An invading army can be confronted. A monster can be attacked. But what happens when the series of rules determining who may command have themselves been compromised? Force becomes complicated. A warrior sent against Anzu must face more than claws or wings. He must confront someone who possesses authority capable of interfering with the conditions of battle. The tablet turns rebellion into something more dangerous than ordinary violence. Anzu has not simply challenged the king, he has stolen the language in which command becomes effective. Outside the divine assembly, the landscape remains eerily calm. Fields still stretch beneath the sun. Rivers continue their slow movement. Human beings may know nothing of the disturbance imagined in heaven. Yet the myth invites you to sense hidden instability beneath ordinary appearances. The world can look unchanged while its governing order has already been damaged. That is a deeply Mesopotamian anxiety. Cities depended upon canals that required constant maintenance. A neglected embankment might appear harmless until floodwater arrived. A kingdom might seem secure until an army crossed the frontier. A temple might stand proudly while political authority around it weakened. Stability required attention. Nothing could simply be assumed. The same thought surrounds the stolen tablet. Anzu holds it somewhere beyond the familiar centers of order, and the gods must decide how to respond. The silence created by the theft is not emptiness. It is uncertainty. A command once carried recognized weight. Now command itself has become contested. The universe remains in place, but its confidence has been shaken. And somewhere in the wild heights, a stolen tablet rests beneath the possession of a being who has discovered that the most dangerous way to attack a system may not be to destroy it. It may be to take control of the authority that tells everyone else what is allowed to happen. Wind moves across the mountain heights while Ninurta prepares to attack the creature holding divine authority. His weapon seems ordinary by heroic standards, though nothing about the confrontation itself is ordinary. The warrior god must strike an enemy protected by something more troubling than armor. Anzu can command conditions. You hear the first rush of movement through the cold air. A bow bends, a missile flies, and sharpened force races toward its target. Then the expected sequence breaks. Anzu speaks. The weapon does not simply miss. Instead, the parts composing it are commanded toward the natural sources from which craftsmen once made them. Wood is directed towards the forest. Reed is called toward its growth. Feathers belong once more with birds. The manufactured object loses the unity that allowed it to function as a weapon. For a moment, craftsmanship itself seems reversible. This is one of the most remarkable ideas preserved within the Anzu tradition. Scholars working with Mesopotamian literature have examined surviving manuscripts from ancient Assyrian and Babylonian collections, including material connected with Nineveh. Research at institutions such as the University of Chicago has helped reconstruct these damaged literary compositions from tablets scattered among museums and collections. The surviving language is difficult. Broken lines interrupt the action. Ancient expressions resist perfect translation. Yet the scene clearly presents Ninurta's weapon as something whose assembled state becomes vulnerable through Anzu's command. That distinction is crucial. Anzu does not merely place a shield between himself and the missile, he interferes with what the missile is allowed to remain. You can feel the strange logic slowly settling into place. A weapon begins as separate materials. Wood grows from a tree, reeds rise from wet ground. Feathers grow from living birds. Human or divine craft joins those materials into something possessing a new purpose. Once joined, the object acquires another identity. It becomes a tool, it becomes a weapon. It becomes capable of producing an outcome its separate materials could never achieve. Anzu's command attacks that transformation. The completed thing is treated as temporary. Its earlier state is still welcome. This is not resurrection in the familiar sense. Nothing dead suddenly stands upright, breathes again, and walks home. The principle is stranger. Something that has passed into one condition can apparently be ordered toward an earlier condition. That possibility introduces a different meaning of return. Return may not require movement across distance. It may involve movement across states. A crafted object can be conceptually sent backward toward the materials hidden inside its history. You run your fingers across the imagined wooden shaft. Its smooth surface carries evidence of cutting, trimming, straightening, binding, and deliberate human skill. None of those actions appear visible when the finished weapon rests in your hand. The object hides its past. Anzu's command exposes it. What appears complete is reminded that it was once unfinished. What appears unified is reminded that it was once separate. This is where the tablet's association with Destiny becomes especially provocative. If destiny includes assigned condition or established function, then changing destiny might mean changing what something is permitted to be. A weapon has an assigned function. Its materials have been organized towards that purpose. Anzu seems able to challenge the assignment itself. That interpretation remains debated. Some scholars understand the passage mainly as magical language characteristic of heroic myth, where divine speech neutralizes an opponent through poetic reversal. Others see deeper connections with Mesopotamian ideas about creation, naming, divine command, the establishment of proper functions. There is no scholarly consensus requiring a literal theory of matter reversal. The text remains mythological literature, yet mythology can preserve sophisticated ideas without becoming disguised science. Ancient storytellers understood transformation intimately. Grain becomes bread. Barley becomes beer. Clay becomes a tablet. Wool becomes cloth. Ore becomes metal. Trees become doors. Reeds become boats. Everywhere around Mesopotamian cities, people watched raw materials acquire new identities through labour. Craftsmanship was controlled transformation. To reverse craftsmanship would therefore be deeply unsettling. Imagine a carpenter finishing a door, only to watch the wood reject its shape. Imagine woven cloth returning conceptually toward loose fibres. Imagine Fedber. Ix forgetting walls. The fear is not simple destruction. Destruction leaves fragments. Reversal questions whether the completed form ever possessed permanent authority over its materials. A modern fringe interpretation pushes this imagery toward lost technology. Some writers imagine the Tablet of Destinies as a device capable of manipulating physical structures through commands. They compare its effects with programmable matter or systems that can restore earlier configurations. No archaeological discovery supports that claim. Nothing recovered from Mesopotamia demonstrates equipment capable of controlling matter through advanced technology. The comparison belongs to modern speculation. Still, the ancient idea needs no machine to remain extraordinary. Words matter profoundly within Mesopotamian religion. Divine speech can establish decisions because gods possess authority unavailable to ordinary humans. A command becomes effective not simply because of sound, but because of who speaks and what status supports the command. That may explain Anzu's advantage. He possesses the tablet associated with supreme decree. His voice therefore carries stolen weight. When he tells the weapon to return, the command does not sound like a request. It sounds like an instruction backed by authority powerful enough to interrupt its present condition. Ninurta faces a terrifying problem. Every conventional attack depends upon objects remaining what they are. A bow must remain a bow. A shaft must remain straight. Feathers must remain attached. A point must remain fixed. The weapon functions because many materials agree, in a physical sense, to stay joined. Anzu attacks that agreement. You hear the projectile lose coherence before reaching him. The moment contains almost no violence. That makes it stranger. A weapon normally fails through impact, breakage, poor aim, or resistance. Here, failure begins with identity. The object becomes unreliable because its history has been called against it. This concept may have resonated strongly in a culture obsessed with a proper arrangement. Mesopotamian rituals frequently depend upon correct materials, correct words, correct sequences, and correct participants. Scholars from Yale University and other major research centers have shown how ritual texts preserve extraordinary attention to ordered procedure. Changing one element could alter meaning. The cosmos was not imagined as casual. Order had to be maintained. Anzu exploits that very sensitivity. He does not need endless strength if he can challenge the arrangement, making an attack possible. The scene therefore raises a quiet philosophical question. What makes something truly itself? Is an arrow defined by its present shape, its purpose, its materials, or the intention that joined them? Ancient scribes never answer in modern philosophical language. They do something more effective. They show you the weapon failing. You watch craftsmanship dissolve beneath a command. You sense a universe where present form may be less secure than it appears. Perhaps that is why this episode continues to attract unusual interpretations. It touches an intuition that feels almost universal. Everything carries a past inside it. Stone remembers a mountain. Metal remembers ore. Or wood remembers a tree. The body remembers food, water, earth, and generations of inherited life. Usually those earlier conditions remain inaccessible. Time moves upward. Forms change. The finished thing becomes familiar enough that its origins disappear from attention. But Anzu's command imagines authority reaching backward through that chain. Not through memory alone. Through consequence. The weapon cannot complete its purpose because its previous identities have suddenly become relevant again. That possibility gives the word return a much darker depth. Returning does not necessarily mean coming home. It can mean being stripped of what you became. It can mean losing the form that allowed you to act within the present. Under the stolen authority of the tablet of Destinies, even a completed thing may discover that its past has never entirely released it. And somewhere above the silent mountains, a weapon falls useless because the universe has been told to remember what it was. Your mind drifts toward a simpler question, though the answer refuses to remain simple for long. What does it mean for something to return? In ordinary life, the word suggests movement. A traveller returns to a house, a shepherd returns to the city, a boat returns to the riverbank. Ancient myth can use the idea differently. A thing may return without crossing any distance at all. It may return by losing the condition it presently possesses. You stand beside a craftsman shaping wood beneath the shade of a courtyard roof. His knife removes thin curls from the surface while dust settles across his hands. Nearby, another worker binds reeds into useful forms. Transformation surrounds you. Mesopotamian civilization clay becomes brick. Barley becomes bread and beer. Here, wool becomes cloth. Copper becomes tools. Stone becomes seals. Raw material receives shape, purpose, and social meaning through human labor. Researchers at institutions including the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago have reconstructed much of this technological world through archaeological remains, workshop evidence, administrative records, and surviving artifacts. Their findings reveal societies remarkably skilled at managing materials. Craftsmanship is not mysterious or rare. It is essential. Yet ancient religion gives transformation another dimension. Divine authority can establish what things are, what roles they perform, and where they belong within the ordered world. A river is not merely water moving downhill. It belongs within a sacred landscape. A city is not merely buildings. It possesses a divine identity. A king is not merely a man wearing expensive clothing. He occupies an authorized role. The same mentality can make reversal deeply significant. If proper order gives something its recognized condition, then losing that order may expose what existed beneath it. A weapon becomes wood again. A crafted object becomes separate material. A finished state collapses toward an earlier possibility. The image feels almost scientific to modern ears, but caution is necessary. Ancient Mesopotamian scribes did not describe molecules, stored information, or physical laws in the modern sense. They worked inside a symbolic universe where words, divine decisions, ritual actions, and material objects could belong to the same meaningful structure. That world is different from yours. Yet it is not irrational. Its logic simply begins elsewhere. Yes. Consider well. Wo city to game to royale to crane. Oh. A king assigns farmland to an official. So, official, the soil itself does not change. No mountain moves. No plant transforms. Still, something real has happened. The field has entered a new recognized condition because authority has changed its status. Another decree could reverse that condition. The official loses the land. Ownership returns elsewhere. Nothing supernatural is required. The transformation exists within the social order. Now enlarge that principle until divine authority governs creation. A god does not merely change ownership. A divine command may determine function itself. This offers one possible way to understand mythic reversal. The object may not be imagined as physically travelling through time. Instead, its established identity may be revoked. It's no longer permitted to function as the thing it became. That reading has a quiet elegance. It also remains uncertain. Scholars continue debating whether such passages should be understood primarily through ritual language, poetic imagery, theological concepts, or traditions of magical command. Different specialists emphasize different elements because ancient literature rarely provides explanatory notes for modern readers. The scribes assume familiarity. You inherit fragments. That gap creates room for imagination. Some modern enthusiasts picture the Tablet of Destinies as a machine storing the original patterns of objects. In that theory, a commander could restore an earlier configuration, almost as though reality possessed recoverable versions. It is an intriguing comparison. There is no physical evidence for such a device. No Mesopotamian excavation has uncovered technology capable of reversing matter or restoring objects through encoded instructions. Still, though, the popularity of the theory reveals something interesting about modern thinking. You also live among systems that remember earlier states. A damaged document can sometimes be restored. A machine can return to factory settings. A digital file may preserve several versions. Modern experience therefore encourages you to interpret ancient return language through technological metaphors. The danger is subtle. A metaphor can illuminate one feature while quietly replacing the original world view. Ancient scribes did not need computers to imagine reversal. They already possessed agriculture. Every year gave them transformation on a vast scale. Seeds disappeared beneath soil and emerged as plants. Fields became green, then gold, then sour. Floodwater arrived and withdrew. Date palms produced fruit according to recurring seasons. The moon vanished and returned. Cycles were visible everywhere. Death and renewal could therefore appear embedded within nature without implying modern mechanisms. But manufactured objects present a different problem. A plant naturally returns through cycles. A crafted weapon does not. Once wood has been cut, trimmed, shaped, bound, and fitted, it normally remains altered until decay or destruction takes it apart. To imagine deliberate reversal is therefore unusual. It transforms ordinary craftsmanship into a philosophical puzzle. You lift a piece of carved wood. Its grain still reveals the tree. The craftsman's work has changed its purpose without erasing its origin. Both identities coexist. It is wood. It is also a tool. Perhaps mythic reversal exploits precisely that tension. A divine command does not need to invent an earlier state. The earlier state is still conceptually present inside the object. The tool carries its material ancestry. The weapon carries the forest. The brick carries the river mud. The tablet carries the clay pit. Human beings understand this typically. You can look at a ruined wall and imagine scattered bricks. You can look at borrowed bricks and imagine wet clay. You can look at clay and imagine the riverbank. Thought itself moves backward easily. Myth gives that backward movement authority. What your mind can reconstruct conceptually, the divine word can make consequential. There is something slightly unsettling in that idea because identity begins to feel temporary. You depend upon stable categories. A door is a door. A house is a house. A body is a body. Yet every category rests upon materials that once belonged elsewhere. Ancient Mesopotamian thought often treats proper naming and proper function as deeply meaningful. Texts concerning rituals, divine powers, and cosmic organization repeatedly connect order with correct relationships. Researchers at Yale University have explored how Mesopotamian scholarly traditions organize the world through lists, correspondences, classifications, and inherited systems of knowledge. The habit of classification was remarkably persistent. Scribes copied enormous lexical lists for generations. They arranged words, professions, animals, plants, stones, places, and objects into ordered sequences. That scholarly practice carries a curious philosophical implication. To name something is to place it. To classify it is to recognize its relationship with other things. A disrupted category can therefore feel like disrupted order. One quirky detail from scribal education makes this especially vivid. Students sometimes copied long lists containing objects they may rarely have encountered personally. Their education trained them to preserve an ordered intellectual world inherited from earlier scribes. Knowledge itself became a form of continuity. You can almost hear the exhausted student wondering why the universe contains quite so many things requiring memorization. The joke is gentle. The principle is serious. Order depends upon remembering distinction. The mythic command of return seems to move in the opposite direction. Instead of preserving the distinction between material and finished object, it collapses that distinction. The organized thing becomes vulnerable to its own origins. This may be poetic magic. It may express cosmic restoration. It may dramatize the authority of divine speech. The important point is not choosing one modern explanation too quickly. The mystery becomes richer when several possibilities remain open. You listen to the imagined workshop growing quiet at sunset. Tools are placed aside. Finished objects lie where workers left them, each possessing a purpose created through skilled hands. They appear secure, yet every object carries another story beneath its surface. The wood was once living. The metal was once hidden in stone. The clay was once shapeless earth. Form has covered history without destroying it. Perhaps this is why the ancient idea of return feels so strange. It suggests that destiny may govern not only where something is going, but which layer of its identity is allowed to remain real. And if authority can choose between those layers, then creation itself begins to look less like a permanent achievement and more like a condition that must continually be permitted to endure. Cold air presses against the mountain slopes as Ninurta studies an enemy who cannot be defeated by ordinary force. Strength alone is no longer enough. Every attack depends upon a stable sequence of cause and effect. A bow must bend, a projectile must travel through, and a sharpened point must remain joined to its shaft. Anzu has made that sequence unreliable. Ninurta therefore faces something more difficult than a powerful monster. He faces an opponent whose stolen authority interferes with the conditions that allow weapons to work. The battlefield becomes strangely intellectual. You might expect a warrior god to answer resistance with greater violence. Instead, the surviving tradition presents a problem requiring guidance, strategy, and careful adaptation. Mesopotamian heroic literature often praises physical power, but it also values intelligence. A ruler who charges blindly into danger is not necessarily admirable. A successful hero listens. He observes. He learns where the weakness lies. Ninurta belongs to a complicated divine tradition connected with warfare, agriculture, kingship, and the defeat of threatening forces. Ancient hymns and myths celebrate him as a champion who restores proper order when dangerous beings disturb it. Researchers at universities, including the University of Oxford and Yale University, have studied how Ninurta's identity changed across periods and cities. His role is never limited to battle. He is also associated with the organization of conquered forces and the transformation of dangerous landscapes into productive ones. That makes his confrontation with Anzu especially fitting. This is not simply a duel between two strong beings. One represents stolen command. The other must restore order through disciplined action. You stand beside Ninurta as the first attacks fail. The mountain air carries the sharp smell of stone and dust. Broken weapon parts lie across the ground, no longer useful in the form intended by their makers. There is frustration here. Perhaps even disbelief. A warrior can accept missing a target. It is harder to accept a target that can challenge the nature of the weapon itself. The usual logic of combat has become unreliable. Ninurta must discover another path. In some versions of the tradition, divine counsel becomes essential. Wisdom enters the conflict where brute strength cannot solve the problem. That detail reflects a broader Mesopotamian theme. Power often becomes legitimate only when aligned with proper knowledge. A king requires advisors. Always. A priest requires ritual experts. A scribe requires training. A warrior requires strategy. Even gods can need instruction. The idea would have been entirely familiar to societies where specialized knowledge determined whether large institutions functioned correctly. Canals required engineers. Temples required ritual experts. Archives required scribes. Armies required command. An error made by the wrong specialist could affect thousands of people. Ninurta's challenge therefore resembles a larger principle of organized life. The problem is not simply difficult. It belongs to a system whose rules must be understood before the system can be repaired. Scholars continue debating how much of the Anzu narrative reflects older traditions of divine kingship and how much belongs to later literary reshaping. Some emphasize the story as a celebration of Ninurta's heroic status. Others focus on the restoration of legitimate cosmic authority. A few give greater attention to the relationship between warfare and wisdom. These interpretations are not mutually exclusive. Ancient myth often works through accumulation. A single episode can support ritual, political, theological, and literally bore meanings at once. You hear another weapon prepared. This time the attack is not simply repeated. The hero begins to change his method. That shift matters because Anzu's advantage depends upon predictability. If every attack follows the same structure, the stolen authority can answer it in the same way. Strategy begins by refusing repetition. There is something surprisingly modern in that. When a system defeats one approach reliably, success requires changing the structure of the attempt. Not more force, different logic. One fringe interpretation imagines Ninurta's eventual success as a story about defeating an advanced defensive technology by identifying its operating limitation. Enthusiasts sometimes describe Anzu's power as though it were a protective field governed by commands. There is no archaeological evidence for such technology. The ancient narrative does not require machinery to make sense. Still, the comparison persists because the hero's problem does resemble a contest between action and counteraction. Anzu can answer what he understands. Ninurta must act where the stolen command becomes less effective. The deeper question concerns whether possessing destiny gives complete control. Apparently, it does not. That limitation is crucial. If the Tablet of Destinies granted absolute power, no opponent could ever recover it. The story would end at the theft. Instead, Anzu remains vulnerable. His possession is extraordinary but incomplete. This suggests that divine authority in Mesopotamian thought may have required more than simply holding the object connected with command. Status matters, knowledge matters, recognition matters, perhaps correct use matters as well. The tablet gives Anzu enough power to disrupt order, but not enough to create a permanent new order everyone accepts. He can interfere. He cannot fully replace. That distinction changes the mood of the battle. Ninurta is no longer fighting an invincible master of reality. He is confronting a usurper exploiting authority he does not completely understand. You can imagine the realization settling over him. The mountain still belongs to the world. The gods still exist. The stolen tablet has not raised every rule. Some structure survives beneath the crisis, and anything that survives can become the basis of resistance. This is where Ninurta's role as restorer becomes more important than his role as warrior. Victory requires identifying what Anzu cannot command. Perhaps the thief can reverse a weapon's construction. Perhaps he can challenge its assembled condition. Yet he cannot necessarily anticipate every strategic choice made by a determined opponent. The gap is small. It is enough. Mesopotamian stories frequently reward heroes who cooperate with wiser divine figures rather than relying entirely upon themselves. Knowledge travels through relationships, just as authority does. No god exists in complete isolation. Even powerful beings occupy networks of kinship, rank, obligation, and counsel. That pattern reflects the social world that produced these stories. A ruler who ignored experienced advisors risked disaster. A military commander who failed to understand terrain could lose an army. A farmer who misunderstood water could lose a harvest. Wisdom is practical. Ninurta's struggle makes that principle cosmic. The mountain grows darker as clouds gather above the ridges. Anzu remains dangerous, but the mood has shifted. His power no longer feels limitless. The very need to answer each attack reveals something. He is reacting. That means he can be pressured. He must watch what Ninurta does. He must respond correctly. A ruler who appears completely secure never needs constant reaction. A usurper does. That weakness gives the scene its quiet tension. Ninurta does not need to overpower the Tablet of Destinies itself. He needs to defeat the being who currently uses it. The difference is narrow but profound. Authority may seem absolute when viewed from a distance. Up close, it depends upon judgment. It depends upon tension, some ways, upon timing, It depends upon understanding what the command can and cannot accomplish. You hear the wind rise between the cliffs. Loose dust moves across the battlefield, covering broken pieces of failed attacks. Ninurta stands among them without retreating. He has learned that a weapon can fail. He has also learned that failure teaches. Every unsuccessful strike reveals another boundary around Anzu's stolen power. And somewhere within those boundaries lies a path toward restoring a universe that has discovered, perhaps for the first time, that destiny itself can be challenged without becoming unlimited. The mountain air settles around a battlefield that no longer feels like a place of ordinary combat. Ninurta has found the weakness. Anzu can disrupt attacks through stolen command, but he cannot transform theft into unquestioned sovereignty. The distinction now becomes decisive. A carefully chosen strike succeeds. The great rebel falls. Silence spreads across the heights, and the tablet of Destinies is recovered from the one who tried to build authority through possession alone. The crisis ends not because the tablet loses power. It ends because control returns to the structure that recognizes how that power should be used. That difference is easy to overlook. A modern reader may imagine the tablet like a weapon whose owner changes whenever someone picks it up. Yet Mesopotamian ideas of authority are usually more complicated than simple possession. Objects can represent office. They do not automatically create legitimacy. You can hold a seal without being the official whose authority it represents. You can sit upon a throne without becoming accepted as the rightful king. You can even command obedience for a time. Recognition is another matter. This distinction was painfully familiar in the political history of ancient Mesopotamia. Dynasties rose through conquest, rebellion, inheritance, marriage, and opportunism. A new ruler often needed more than soldiers. He needed sacred approval. He needed temples. He needed ceremonies. He needed inscription explaining why his kingship belonged within the proper order of the world. Researchers and institutions, including the University of Chicago and the University of Oxford, have examined royal inscriptions showing how frequently Mesopotamian rulers grounded their authority in divine selection. Kings described gods as choosing them, supporting them, or placing them upon the throne. Such language was not decorative. It explained why power should be considered rightful. Ninurta's recovery of the tablet follows a similar logic on a divine scale. The object returns to legitimate custody. Order becomes possible again. The tablet does not need to be destroyed because the tablet was never the true enemy. The problem was unauthorized control. That idea carries a surprisingly subtle political philosophy. Power itself is not necessarily corrupting. Power placed outside recognized order becomes dangerous. The ancient storyteller therefore avoids an easy solution. No god announces that the Tablet of Destinies is too dangerous to exist. Nobody throws it into a river. Nobody shatters it into pieces. Its authority remains necessary. The universe apparently requires binding decisions. The solution is restoration, not abolition. You can imagine the divine assembly receiving news of Ninurta's victory. The atmosphere changes from uncertainty to relief. The gods who had hesitated now see that the central structure of command can be repaired. Ninurta returns not merely as a successful fighter. He becomes the defender of legitimate order. That status matters. Mesopotamian kings frequently compare military victories with the restoration of stability. Royal inscriptions portray defeated enemies as rebels, disturbers, or outsiders threatening the proper arrangement of lands. The language should not be accepted uncritically. Kings wrote propaganda with impressive enthusiasm. Still, the pattern reveals an important cultural ideal. Victory is presented as meaningful when it restores order. The heroic achievement is therefore not destruction for its own sake. It is correction. Ninurta removes dangerous disruption and returns authority to its accepted place. Scholars continue discussing exactly how the tablet functions within different versions of the myth. Some emphasize Enlil's supreme authority. Others examine Ninurta's rise in prestige through heroic achievement. There is also debate about whether the story reflects political models from particular historical periods. The surviving texts do not force one interpretation. Several meanings can coexist. This flexibility may explain why the tradition remained useful across generations. A king could hear a lesson about rebellion. A priest could hear a lesson about divine hierarchy. A scholar could hear a meditation on authority. A listener could simply enjoy a story about a terrifying bird creature making weapons useless, which is admittedly difficult to forget. One curious modern theory suggests that Ninurta's recovery of the tablet resembles regaining control of a compromised system. The tablet becomes something like a master authorization device, while Anzu becomes an unauthorized user who temporarily gains access. There is no archaeological evidence for such technology. Still, the metaphor reveals one genuine feature of the myth. Control and permission are not the same thing. Anzu possesses control. The divine order denies him permission. Ninurta's victory brings those two elements back together. You turn the recovered tablet over in your imagination. It remains silent. No visible light emerges from its surface. No mechanism appears. Its authority exists because of relationships extending far beyond the object itself. Enlil's status matters. The divine assembly matters. Recognition matters. The cosmic hierarchy matters. The tablet is powerful because it belongs within this network. This makes the object more intriguing, not less. A magical weapon is simple. It works because it had magical. A symbol of authority is more complicated because its power depends upon the world around it. Human societies operate the same way. A crown is valuable because people recognize kingship. Money works because communities recognize value. A legal document matters because institutions agree that its words create consequences. Remove the network and the object changes. Gold remains gold. Paper remains paper. Clay remains clay. Authority disappears. The Tablet of Destinies may represent an ancient version of this principle raised to cosmic scale. The gods collectively inhabit an ordered system. The tablet expresses the authority that makes certain decisions binding inside that system. Anzu can seize the expression. He cannot permanently seize the relationship supporting it. That may explain why his rule remains unstable. He can interrupt. He cannot fully replace. The distinction also changes how you think about return. Restoration is itself a kind of return. The tablet returns to rightful custodies. Divine command returns to recognized authority. The gods return to an ordered relationship. Functions interrupted by rebellion become possible again. Nothing needs to travel backward through time. The return is structural. A damaged arrangement is restored to the condition recognized as proper. This kind of thinking appears frequently in Mesopotamian religious practice. Rituals often seek to restore balance after pollution, illness, ominous events, or disrupted relationships with divine forces. The desired outcome is not always the creation of something new. Often it is the recovery of correct order. A person becomes clean again. A household becomes protected again. A king receives reassurance again. The ritual world values repaired conditions. That wider cultural pattern makes Ninurta's victory feel less like the end of an adventure and more like cosmic maintenance. The universe has suffered a dangerous malware. Misalignment. A specialist restores it. You can almost hear the dry humour hidden inside that idea. Even heaven apparently has administrative emergency. Seize! Yet the consequences remain serious. A world governed by order must possess ways to recover from disruption. Otherwise every rebellion would become permanent. Every broken decree would destroy the system forever. Ninurta proves that restoration is possible. But restoration requires legitimacy. The thief cannot simply declare his arrangement permanent because he controls the object associated with command. The recognized order can still resist him. That detail becomes especially important when thinking about who may return from altered conditions. If return depends upon authority, then possession alone may never be sufficient. The right command may need the right speaker. The right object may need the right holder. The right outcome may require recognition from a larger divine structure. Ancient mythology does not present this as a written legal formula. It dramatizes the principle through conflict. You watch Ninurta carry the recovered symbol of command away from the mountain. The landscape seems unchanged. Stone remains stone. Clouds drift over distant ridges. Yet the meaning of the world has shifted. The tablet is no longer held by rebellion. Authority and legitimacy have been reunited. Perhaps this is the quieter lesson hidden beneath the heroic victory. Destiny may not belong to whoever can seize it. It may belong to the order capable of recognizing which commands are allowed to endure. Your ears catch the imagined sound of deep water moving beneath a darkness older than cities. No temple walls stand here. No cultivated field breaks the pier. The Babylonian creation tradition begins in a universe where familiar boundaries have not yet settled into place. Waters mingle, divine generations emerge, and conflict slowly gathers inside a family of gods whose quarrels will eventually reshape creation. At the center stands Tiamat. She belongs to the primordial waters and becomes the leader of forces opposing the younger gods. Her transformation into an enemy is not immediate. The surviving poem allows tension to accumulate through divine conflict, fear, and retaliation. Then she prepares for war. What happens next is unusually important. Tiamat does not simply gather monsters around herself and send them into battle. She appoints a commander named Kingu and elevates him above the forces assembled beside her. He receives authority, and that authority is marked by the Tablet of Destinies. The great creation poem, preserved on clay tablets from Mesopotamia, describes Tiamat giving the tablet to Kingu and placing him in a position of command. Researchers at institutions including the University of Chicago and the University of Oxford have examined manuscripts of this composition for generations. The text is commonly associated with Babylonian religious tradition and the elevation of Marduk. Its political language is difficult to miss. Kingu becomes more than a favoured companion. He becomes a leader whose authority is formally established. You can almost see the ceremony. Divine forces gather in the dimness. Strange creatures wait beneath a sky that has not yet become the ordered heavens familiar to human beings. Tiamat turns toward Kingu. She grants him to. The tablet becomes the visible sign that her decision is meant to carry weight. This is not merely ornamentation. A necklace can show favour. A weapon can show strength. The Tablet of Destinies shows authorization. Kingu now possesses something that tells the assembled forces his commands should be obeyed. The scene resembles royal appointment. A ruler selects an official, gives him insignia of office, and establishes his position before witnesses. The individual is no longer acting privately. He acts through delegated authority. That distinction is fundamental to Mesopotamian political life. Kings govern through officials. Governors administer provinces. Military commanders receive responsibilities. Temple administrators manage property. Authority moves downward through recognized appointments. The divine world reflects the same structure. Tiamat creates a chain of command. Kingu stands near its summit. His possession of the tablet publicly confirms his place within the coalition she has formed. Yet there is something unstable about this appointment. Tiamat can grant authority within her own side, but the wider divine world does not necessarily accept her decision. Kingu's legitimacy is therefore limited. He is recognized by one order while opposed by another. This creates a deeper problem than simple rebellion. Two systems now claim the right to determine what should happen. You can feel how dangerous that would seem to an ancient audience. Mesopotamian political history contains repeated examples of rival rulers claiming legitimate kingship at the same time. Each could possess armies, officials, cities, and ceremonies. Each could describe the other as unlawful. Authority was rarely abstract. It had to be performed. It had to be recognized. It had to survive challenge. The creation poem magnifies this political reality until the entire universe becomes the disputed territory. Tiamat's forces acknowledge Kingu. The younger gods refuse. The Tablet of Destinies therefore becomes something like a contested charter of command. Scholars continue debating how directly the creation poem reflects Babylonian political ideology. Some emphasize Marduk's rise as a theological expression of Babylon's growing importance. Others focus more strongly on ritual performance, literary composition, or inherited mythic traditions. The poem may contain several historical layers. That uncertainty is valuable. It prevents the story from becoming a simple political slogan. Yet political ideas clearly move through its language. Rank is granted. Command is recognized. Supreme power is negotiated. Destiny itself comes to office. A curious modern theory imagines Kingu's appointment as the transfer of an operating key, almost like a device that grants privileged access to a hidden cosmic system. There is no archaeological evidence for such machinery. The story requires no technological explanation. Still, the metaphor captures something the ancient poem presents quite clearly. Kingu's new authority is transferable. He did not always possess it. Tiamat gives it to him. That means the tablet can function as a portable concentration of delegated power. The implications are fascinating. Kingu does not become stronger merely because Tiamat likes him. His status changes through an act of appointment. The tablet confirms that transformation. In a world where written documents could establish offices, obligations, and ownership, this imagery would have felt natural rather than strange. You move closer to the assembled arm. The creatures surrounding Tiamat are described with extraordinary imagination: serpentine beings, fierce monsters, and supernatural fighters gather beneath her command. Their appearance may seem chaotic. Their organization is not. They have leadership. They have hierarchy. They have authorization. Chaos itself has developed administration. There is a gentle irony in that. Even rebellion apparently needs paperwork. The humorous thought hides a serious insight. The Mesopotamian imagination struggles to conceive lasting power without structure. Wild force can destroy, organized force can rule. Tiamat therefore does something politically intelligent. She transforms an alliance of dangerous beings into an ordered coalition by assigning command to Kingu. The Tablet of Destinies becomes the instrument that helps make that command recognizable. This gives the object another dimension. It does not merely protect an existing ruler. It can help create a new political arrangement. A holder can be elevated. A hierarchy can be established. A group can organize itself around the authority represented by the tablet. Destiny therefore begins to resemble political architecture. It determines who stands above whom. It defines who may issue commands. It establishes whose decisions have consequences. This is far broader than predicting tomorrow. A prediction tells you what will happen. An authoritative destiny helps determine what is allowed to happen. The difference is enormous. You can hear it in the way ancient kings describe themselves. They are chosen. They are appointed. They receive divine favor. Their kingship is presented as part of an established order rather than an accident of military success. Kingu receives something similar from Tiamat, yet his authority exists inside a coalition destined for confrontation. That makes the tablet strangely vulnerable once again. If its power can be transferred by appointment, it can also become attached to a defeated authority. A divine symbol can carry impressive command while still belonging to a political order that fails. This tension separates authority from permanence. Something can be valid within one structure and rejected within another. The idea feels surprisingly sophisticated. Modern governments also understand that an official document depends upon the institution recognizing it. The seal from a fallen regime may retain historical value without commanding present obedience. A decree from a defeated ruler may survive physically while losing practical force. Ancient Mesopotamian storytellers understood the same instability through sacred imagery. Kingu holds the Tablet of Destinies. He has rank. He has followers. He has a formal role. Yet the wider cosmos remains unmeddled. The water around Tiamat seems heavy and dark. Her assembled forces wait beneath the authority she has constructed around them. Kingu stands among them, carrying the sign of his elevated position. He is no random warrior now. He is the appointed commander of a rival cosmic order, and the tablet resting with him quietly reveals something essential about destiny. Destiny can be assigned. Authority can be transferred. A new hierarchy can be declared into existence. But no declaration becomes permanent simply because someone possesses the object that confirms it. The universe must still decide which order survives. A strange stillness settles over the divine assembly as Marduk steps forward to face a crisis no less a god has resolved. He does not volunteer without conditions. Before accepting the danger, he asks the gathered gods to recognize something greater than courage. He wants his command to possess unquestioned authority if he succeeds. The request changes the meaning of the coming battle. Marduk is not merely seeking permission to fight. He is negotiating to sovereignty. You imagine the gods gathered beneath a dim celestial roof, speaking in measured voices while uncertainty hangs around them. Their enemy possesses armies, supernatural creatures, and a commander carrying the Tablet of Destinies. Force alone will not settle the problem. The victor must also determine whose order becomes legitimate. According to the Babylonian creation poem, the gods eventually grant Marduk an elevated position and acknowledge the effectiveness of his word. A test dramatizes this new authority. An object is placed before him. Marduk commands it to disappear. Then he orders it restored. The object returns. This episode is remarkably important because it connects supreme authority with the ability to alter a condition through speech. Marduk's word is presented as effective because the divine assembly has granted him exceptional status. Researchers at Yale University, the University of Chicago, and the University of Oxford have examined how this literary scene supports Marduk's rise within Babylonian theology. The poem presents kingship among the gods as something formally recognized. Power requires confirmation. The assembled deities do not simply notice that Marduk is strong, they establish that his commands should carry consequences. You can feel the distinction. A warrior can break something. A sovereign can declare what its condition should be. Marduk's test, therefore, resembles more than magical entertainment. It demonstrates that his speech possesses the authority needed to impose order. The strange object vanishes. The command changes. The object reappears. No detailed mechanism is offered. The poem is interested in authority rather than explanation. Still, the imagery raises an intriguing question about restoration. Something that is no longer present can be commanded into presence again. The text does not describe a dead human returning from the underworld. It does not say the Tablet of Destinies itself performs this demonstration. Those distinctions matter. Yet the episode shows that Babylonian divine kingship could be imagined through command over states of existence. Something is present, then absent, then present again. The sequence is come almost as ceremonial. That restraint makes it unusual. Once Marduk's authority is recognized, he enters battle against Tiamat. The poem transforms cosmic conflict into a contest between competing forms of rule. Tiamat commands powerful forces. Marduk brings weapons, winds, divine support, and newly confirmed sovereignty. His success establishes more than military superiority. It allows him to reorganize the universe. The ancient account gives this act enormous scale. Marduk separates regions, arranges celestial structures, assigns stations, regulates heavenly bodies, and creates an ordered cosmos from the defeated forces surrounding him. Creation becomes administration. Stars receive positions. Divine roles receive structure. Time itself gains recognizable patterns through celestial movement. The victorious god behaves almost like a king organizing a newly acquired territories. That resemblance would not have been accidental. Babylonian rulers governed through appointment, measurement, taxation, construction, law, military control, and religious legitimacy. Their chief god performs cosmic versions of similar acts. Marduk does not merely defeat disorder, he assigns places. This is where the Tablet of Destinies becomes politically important again. Kingu, having received the tablet as the sign of command within Tiamat's coalition, loses his position when that coalition collapses. The tablet is taken away. His authority ends. Marduk's side now controls the symbol associated with binding decree. Possession has followed victory, but the poem does not treat victory alone as sufficient. Marduk has already received recognition from the divine assembly. He therefore combines force, appointment, and successful restoration of order. Those elements create a stronger claim than possession alone could provide. The difference is subtle. Kingu receives delegated authority from one divine power. Marduk receives confirmation from a wider assembly and proves his ability to establish order. One command structure collapses. Another becomes dominant. Scholars still discuss how precisely this literary transformation reflects the historical rise of Babylon itself. Marduk was not always the supreme god of Mesopotamia. His increasing prominence developed alongside Babylon's political importance. Although religious change was gradual and complicated, some historians interpret the creation poem as a theological celebration of Babylonian supremacy. Others caution that its date, ritual use, and stages of composition remain subjects of continuing debate. The uncertainty matters because myth and politics rarely move together in simple lines. Cities inherit old gods. Priests preserve earlier traditions. Kings promote particular cults. Scribes reshape stories without erasing every older layer. The result is not propaganda alone. It is accumulated memory. One fringe interpretation takes Marduk's cosmic ordering literally and imagines a technological administrator gaining access to an ancient control system. In this reading, the Tablet of Destinies becomes a master key capable of assigning functions throughout creation. No archaeological evidence supports such a device. The fascination comes from the language of controlled order itself. The poem describes reality as something capable of arrangement. Positions can be assigned. Boundaries can be fixed. Roles can be granted. Authority determines which arrangement receives recognition. That pattern feels almost procedural. Yet it belongs naturally within ancient kingship. A new ruler entering a conquered city often faced a practical challenge. Winning the battle did not automatically produce a functioning state. Officials had to be appointed. Temples needed support. Taxes needed collection. Canals required maintenance. Local elites needed cooperation. Order had to be built from victory. Marduk performs the cosmic equivalent. His greatness lies not merely in defeating an enemy, but in making a stable world possible afterward. You stand within that newly ordered universe and notice how carefully everything receives a place. Heavens stretch above. Earth settles beneath. Celestial bodies move according to recognizable courses. Divine responsibilities become organized. The atmosphere feels less like spontaneous creation and more like a vast settlement decree. Something has been authorized. This offers another way to think about destiny. Perhaps destiny, within such stories, is closely related to placement. To receive a destiny may mean receiving an allotted role within an ordered world. A god receives a function. A star receives a station. A ruler receives kingship. A city receives favour. To alter destiny would therefore involve more than changing the futures. It could mean changing the recognised position from which the future unfolds. Marduk's rise demonstrates this beautifully. His personal existence does not change. His status does. The divine assembly recognises him differently, and that recognition transforms what his commands can accomplish. Authority changes the consequences of speech. A sentence uttered by an ordinary being may be ignored. The same sentence issued by an acknowledged sovereign becomes a decree. Mesopotamian society understood this distinction intimately. So did in its mythology. The Tablet of Destinies stands within that world as a concentrated symbol of recognized command. It does not need to predict every future event individually. Its deeper significance may lie in confirming which decisions become binding. That possibility makes the image far more interesting than a simple book of prophecy. A book of prophecy records what will happen. A cosmic charter helps establish what may happen under legitimate authority. You hear the imagined voices of the divine assembly growing quiet. Marduk now stands within a universe whose structure reflects his victory and recognition. The tablet has changed hands because an entire order has changed around it. Its meaning remains connected to sovereignty. Its holder stands near the centre of cosmic government. Yet the most haunting detail is not the battle. It is the earlier demonstration. A god commands something away, then he commands it back. The object returns because recognized divine speech changes its condition. Perhaps ancient audiences heard only a magnificent proof of kingship. Perhaps they sense something deeper. If supreme authority can determine whether something is present, absent, assigned, or restored, then destiny begins to resemble permission written into the fabric of the ordered world. And the question of who may return becomes inseparable from the question of who possesses the authority to say that return is allowed. The ground beneath your feet seems to cool as the world of sunlight gives way to something quieter. Ancient Mesopotamians imagined death not as simple disappearance, but as entry into another domain with its own boundaries, inhabitants, and rules. The dead went somewhere. That place was difficult to escape. You descend through the imagination rather than stone, leaving cultivated fields and bright temple courtyards behind. The air becomes heavy, dry, and still. Above, people continue working. Below, another order waits. Mesopotamian texts describe an underworld separated from ordinary human life by distance, gates, divine authority, and conditions that cannot casually be ignored. The dead do not simply wander back because they miss home. Return requires permission. That idea changes everything. Researchers at institutions including Yale University and the University of Oxford have studied funerary texts, incantations, myths, and administrative evidence connected with Mesopotamian beliefs about the dead. The picture is complicated because traditions changed across centuries. Still, several themes appear repeatedly. The underworld has rulers. It has gates. It has officials. It has expectations. Death enters a system. You might expect the land of the dead to be imagined as pure chaos. Instead, it often feels disturbingly organized. The dead belong there because a boundary has been crossed. Once that crossing occurs, ordinary movement no longer applies. A merchant can leave one city and travel home. A soldier can survive a campaign and return to his family. A dead person faces a different category of departure. The journey changes legal status, social position, and cosmic location all at once. And that is why ancient funerary practice matters. Families cared for their dead through burial and offerings because relationships did not simply end at the grave. Food and drink could be provided ritually. Names could be remembered. Ancestors might remain part of household identity. Neglected dead could become troubling. The boundary between worlds therefore had to be respected without pretending the dead had ceased to matter. This creates a peculiar balance. The dead remain connected. They are not freely accessible. You move through an imagined doorway cut into darkness. The stone feels cold beneath your hand. Beyond it lies no welcoming field of perfect light. Mesopotamian descriptions of the underworld are often far more restrained and somber. Dust appears. Silence appears. The dead occupy a reduced existence compared with the living. Social distinctions may continue in altered forms, but earthly vitality has weakened. Life above depends upon food, sunlight, family breath, labourers, and divine favour. The underworld removes much of that richness. It is continuation without ordinary freedom. That may sound bleak. It is also revealing. If death were absolute non-existence, no gatekeeper would be needed. No underworld ruler would matter. No ritual offerings would have purpose. The very existence of rules suggests that the dead are still considered participants within a larger cosmic arrangement. Their condition has changed. Their place has changed. Their permissions have changed. The strange logic resembles relocation under authority. A person once belonged among the living. Now that person belongs elsewhere. The question of return therefore becomes more than biological restoration. It becomes a question of jurisdiction. Who has authority over the dead? Who can release them? Who decides whether a boundary may be crossed in reverse? These questions appear vividly in Mesopotamian stories involving descent into the underworld. The divine realm contains powerful beings, yet even gods cannot always ignore its regulations. A visitor entering that domain may encounter gates, demands, and irreversible consequences. Power above does not automatically become power below. Different realms possess different authorities. That is an important distinction. A king ruling one city cannot simply issue commands inside another kingdom without resistance. A god associated with storms does not necessarily control the underworld. A divine visitor entering the realm of the dead may therefore become subject to local rules. Mesopotamian mythology treats boundaries seriously. Rivers have banks i unnet. Cities have walls. Temples have restricted rooms. Kingdoms have frontiers. The living and dead have divisions of their own. One scholarly debate concerns how literally ordinary Mesopotamians imagine the geography of the underworld. Some specialists emphasize poetic descriptions and ritual symbolism. Others examine whether people understood the realm as physically beneath the earth in a more concrete cosmological sense. Ancient texts do not provide one standardized map. The imagery changes with genre and pour. What remains consistent is separation. The dead occupy a place the living should not casually enter. The living occupy a place the dead should not casually reclaim. That boundary protects both sides. A quirky detail appears in some traditions concerning the treatment of the dead who lacked proper burial or descendants to provide offerings. Such spirits can become especially troublesome in ritual imagination. A person forgotten by family might possess less stability than one properly incorporated into ancestral memory. It is a strangely practical anxiety. Even eternity seems to benefit from good household management. Behind the humour lies something tender. People feared being forgotten. Burial preserved belonging. Offerings extended relationships. Names kept a person socially present even when physically absent. The underworld was therefore not meant to worship these espèces to omit. It was part of the extended structure of community. Yet community did not erase restriction. Return remained exceptional. This is where the idea of cosmic authorization becomes particularly important. If the dead occupy an assigned condition, then reversing that condition may require more than opening a door. The individual must somehow be released from the status of belonging below. A gate can swing open. That does not necessarily cancel the rules. You pause beside another imagined threshold. A gatekeeper stands somewhere beyond the darkness. His role is not glamorous. It is administrative. He decides who passes. That small detail echoes a larger pattern within Mesopotamian thought. Important transitions are rarely casual. Access is controlled. Status matters. Authority is recognized. A person entering a palace requires permission. A priest entering restricted sacred space requires proper standing. A dead person leaving the underworld may require something even greater. The difference between movement and authorized guard movement becomes crucial. You can cross a boundary illegally. That does not make the crossing legitimate. Ancient myth often explores the consequences when divine or human beings violate established limits. The underworld intensifies that principle because its boundary separates conditions of existence. Living is one state. Dead is another. Return means changing category. This helps explain why stories of revival or escape rarely feel simple. Someone may need substitution. Someone may need divine intervention. Someone may need a special decree. Someone may need to satisfy conditions established by rulers of the lower realm. The underworld behaves less like an empty cavern and more like a kingdom guarding its population. That image may sound almost bureaucratic. Mesopotamian storytellers seem quite comfortable with the idea. Officials appear throughout divine worlds because administration is part of how order becomes understandable. Even death requires organization. You listen for movement in the darkness. Nothing rushes toward you. The atmosphere remains calm. That calmness carries its own unease. A chaotic prison might offer accidental escape. An ordered one is more difficult. Every gate has purpose. Every guardian belongs to a hierarchy. Every traveller has a status. The dead remain where they are because the system expects them to remain there. Perhaps this is why returning becomes such an extraordinary privilege. It's not simply the reversal of physical death. It is an exception granted against an established cosmic arrangement. The person who returns must cross not only darkness but authority. And within that ancient vision, the most important question is no longer whether a path upward exists. It is whether anyone has the right to open it. The air smells faintly of dust and cold stone as Inanna approaches the gates of the underworld. She is not an ordinary traveller. Inanna belongs among the most powerful deities of ancient Mesopotamia, associated with love, political authority, conflict, and the dangerous force of desire. Her presence can transform cities and kings. Yet the underworld does not bend simply because she arrives. That is the unsettling beginning. The ancient composition describing her descent survives in Sumerian literary tradition, through tablets copied by scribes many centuries after the story first took shape. Scholars at institutions including the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Oxford have studied these manuscripts alongside other Mesopotamian underworld texts. The tale begins with deliberate movement. Inanna turns her attention toward the realm below and prepares to descend. Her motives have generated continuing scholarly discussion. Some interpretations emphasize divine ambition, others focus upon ritual themes, seasonal symbolism, political theology, or a confrontation between complementary divine powers. The text does not reduce her journey to one simple purpose. That uncertainty suits the staying. Inanna travels downward while fully aware destination is dangerous. She gives instructions concerning what should happen if she does not return. That detail reveals caution. Even a goddess understands that entering the underworld creates a problem ordinary divine status may not solve. You stand beside the first gate. A guardian questions her. Access is controlled. Inanna identifies herself and states her purpose, but her name does not cause every barrier to disappear. The gatekeeper reports her arrival to the authority ruling the lower realm. That ruler is Ereshkigal. She is Inanna's sister, but kinship does not erase jurisdiction. Ereshkigal governs the dead. Inside her domain, her authority matters. The gates open according to procedure. Then something strange begins. At each threshold, Inanna must surrender part of the regalia associated with her status. A crown is removed. Jewelry is taken. Garments and symbols of power disappear one by one. With each gate, she becomes less visibly sovereign. The pattern is deliberate. Her authority above does not travel downward intact. You hear the small sounds of objects being set aside in the darkness. Metal touches stone. Cloth slips from skin. Footsteps continue deeper. Nothing about the process is rushed. That makes it more disturbing. At the final threshold, Inanna stands stripped of the visible signs that defined her elevated position. She has entered a place where her former privileges cannot simply command obedience. The underworld recognizes its own hierarchy. This is one of the clearest demonstrations of jurisdiction in Mesopotamian mythology. A divine being can possess immense power and still become subject to another realm's rules. The principle is almost political. A ruler may cross a frontier and discover that his authority ends at the border. Inanna crosses a greater frontier. Her status changes with every gate. The lower world does not merely receive her. It reduces her. Eventually, judgment is pronounced. The ancient account describes a group of underworld judges participating in the decision against her. Their verdict leaves Inanna unable to continue as she was. She becomes lifeless. Her body is suspended. The goddess who entered by choice can no longer leave by choice. That moment is crucial. Return is not treated as a simple act of divine will. Inanna cannot merely decide that the experience has become unpleasant and walk back toward daylight. The gates are still there. The rulers are still there. The judgment still stands. Her altered condition has become part of the lower world's order. Something outside that order must intervene. The instructions Inanna gave before descending now matter. Help is sought among powerful gods. Not everyone responds. Eventually, the god associated strongly with wisdom and clever problem-solving provides assistance. His solution is not a military invasion. That is revealing. No army storms the underworld. No hero smashes the gates and declares the rules cancelled. Instead, a carefully designed intervention works through the conditions of the realm itself. Small beings are created for the task. They enter quietly. They approach Ereshkigal during a moment of suffering and respond to her distress with sympathy rather than confrontation. Their behaviour earns a reward. When offered valuable gifts, they refuse them and request what they actually need. They ask for Inanna. The exchange allows her body to be recovered. Life is restored to her through substances described in the story as capable of reviving the dead. For modern readers, this scene can sound astonishingly close to resurrection, yet the ancient logic remains more complicated. Inanna's restoration does not automatically mean that freedom. She has regained life. She has not yet regained unrestricted permission to remain among the living. That distinction is profound. A body can be revived while a legal or cosmic obligation still exists. Physical restoration and authorized return are not identical. A fringe interpretation sometimes treats the substances used upon Inanna as evidence of lost medical technology or advanced revival methods. No archaeological evidence supports such claims. The story belongs within mythic and ritual imagination, where divine beings can perform acts beyond human possibility. Still, the narrative structure itself deserves attention. Inanna's revival solves only one part of the problem. The underworld requires balance. Someone who leaves may need another to take that place. This requirement turns return into negotiation. You climb with Inanna toward the upper world while strange attendants follow her. They are not companions. They enforce the condition attached to her release. The journey upward therefore carries tension rather than simple triumph. She has crossed the impossible boundary. Yet the lower realm has not surrendered its claim without compensation. This makes her story very different from later religious ideas where resurrection may symbolize final victory over death. Here, death is not defeated. An exception is arranged. The system remains intact. That point has fascinated scholars because the tale combines restoration with obligation. Inanna returns, but her freedom requires a substitute. Researchers continue debating how the narrative relates to ritual performance, seasonal cycles, divine hierarchy, and traditions surrounding political power. No interpretation settles every detail. The story remains stubbornly layered. You can sense why. Inanna is a goddess of extraordinary force. If anyone should simply overpower death, she seems a likely candidate. Instead, her journey demonstrates limits. Rank has boundaries. Power has jurisdictions. Return has conditions. Those ideas fit a world where divine order resembles a network of recognized authorities rather than a single unlimited force. The connection with destiny becomes quietly suggestive. The text does not state that the Tablet of Destinies releases Inanna. It does not place the tablet in her hands. Any direct connection would go beyond the surviving evidence. Yet the underlying logic feels related. Her condition changes through judgment. Her restoration requires authorized intervention. Her departure requires compliance with rules governing who belongs below. Return is therefore not merely a matter of ability. It is a matter of permission. This difference may be one of the most important ideas preserved in the entire tradition. A being can possess life and still owe something to death. A gate can open without cancelling the law behind it. A person can cross upward while another claim follows closely behind. The ancient imagination does not treat cosmic boundaries casually. You feel warmer air as the ascent continues. Light seems possible again. The scent of earth replaces the cold stillness below. Yet the return carries a price not yet paid. Inanna has recovered her life. She has not escaped the structure that allowed her to recover it. And somewhere between darkness and daylight, the ancient story leaves you with a difficult possibility. Perhaps returning from death was never imagined as simply coming back. Perhaps the true question was whether the cosmic order could recognize your presence among the living once more. The light above ground feels warmer, but the freedom surrounding Inanna remains incomplete. She walks beneath an open sky while the agents of the underworld accompany her. Their presence is quiet, persistent, and impossible to ignore. A replacement must be found. The ancient story does not allow one life to leave the realm of the dead without consequence. Someone else must occupy the empty place. That requirement changes the meaning of return. You move beside Inanna through familiar territory while she encounters people who mourned during her absence. Some appear in humble clothing, marked by grief and loyalty. The underworld attendants watch each meeting closely. They're searching for someone. Inanna refuses to surrender those who show devotion. Her decision creates a strange moral tension because every act of mercy narrows the remaining choices. Then she reaches Dumuzi. He is associated with shepherding, fertility, kingship, and seasonal patterns within several Mesopotamian traditions. His relationship with Inanna appears across songs, myths, and ritual literature preserved through scribal copying. Here, however, the reunion's uncomfortable. Dumuzi is not presented in mourning. He appears splendidly dressed and seated with the confidence of someone who has continued living comfortably. Inanna sees him. Her reaction is severe. The attendants receive their victim. Dumuzi becomes the one chosen to satisfy the requirement imposed by the underworld. You can almost hear the silence surrounding that decision. No weapon changes the law. No declaration cancels the demand. Instead, the obligation moves from one person to another. Return creates displacement. That principle is far more unsettling than a simple story of punishment. It suggests that the boundary between life and death behaves almost like an account that must remain balanced. One life emerges, another must descend. Researchers at institutions including the University of Pennsylvania and Yale University have studied the surviving compositions concerning Inanna and Dumuzi, comparing different manuscripts and related lament traditions. These texts reveal that Dumuzi's fate developed through several overlapping stories rather than one perfectly consistent biography. Ancient scribes inherited traditions that could emphasize different relationships, motives, and divine roles. That complexity matters. Dumuzi is not simply a villain receiving deserved punishment. In some traditions, he becomes a tragic figure caught within a larger system. You follow him as fear replaces royal confidence. The shepherd god tries to escape. He runs across open country while the underworld agents pursue him with relentless patience. The landscape changes around you. Fields stretch beneath the sun. Animal paths cross dry ground. Reeds move beside water. Every familiar place feels temporary because the pursuers do not grow tired. Dumuzi seeks help. He appeals to divine relatives. Transformations and escapes delay his capture, but delay is not cancellation. The claim against him remains. This distinction is important. Mesopotamian mythology often allows cleverness to postpone danger without removing the authority behind it. A person may hide. A god may intervene. A form may change. Yet an obligation established by divine judgment can remain active, as you can sense the same logic in legal life. A debtor who leaves a city does not necessarily erase the debt. An official who avoids a messenger has not cancelled the order. Movement changes location. It does not automatically change status. Dumuzi's flight follows that pattern on a cosmic scale. He can run from the agents. He cannot easily run from the condition attached to his selection. Scholars still debate how strongly his story should be connected with agricultural cycles. Earlier generations sometimes interpreted dying and returning gods almost automatically as symbols of vegetation disappearing and reappearing with the seasons. Modern specialists tend to treat that explanation more cautiously. The literary traditions are richer than a single agricultural metaphor. Dumuzi's identity includes pastoral, royal, ritual, and emotional dimensions. Seasonal interpretation remains relevant, but it does not explain in everything. This open debate reveals how easily modern readers simplify ancient religion. A field turning brown is visible. a god descending below is memorable. The temptation to combine them into one neat explanation is strong. Ancient traditions are rarely so polite. They carry contradiction. They preserve older meanings beside newer ones. They allow one to occupy several roles without resolving them into a tidy system. Dumuzi therefore remains difficult to categorize. He is beloved. He is condemned. He is mourned. He is replaced. Eventually another arrangement appears. His sister Geshtinana becomes involved in the burden of his fate. A division is established in which time below can be shared rather than borne by one figure without interruption. The exact presentation varies among related traditions, but the basic idea introduces another form of negotiated return. Dumuzi does not simply escape forever. His absence and presence become regulated. He belongs partly to one realm and partly to another. This is very different from unlimited resurrection. It resembles scheduled permission. A boundary remains intact while movement across it becomes authorized under particular conditions. That concept is remarkable. The underworld does not lose control. The living world does not gain complete possession. A compromise is created. One quirky modern theory imagines this alternating arrangement as evidence of an ancient calendar encoded inside mythology, almost like a ceremonial timetable disguised as divine biography. There is some reasonable basis for connecting Dumuzi with seasonal ritual. There is no evidence for a hidden technological calendar controlling biological return. Still, the comparison captures something genuinely present in the story. Timing matters. Return can be conditional. Presence can be temporary. The divine world appears capable of assigning not only where someone belongs, but when. You feel the year turning around that thought. Heat gathers. Fields change colour. Water levels rise and fall. Animals breed. Harvests come and disappear. Human communities experience life through repetition. What vanishes may return, but rarely exactly the same one. A new crop resembles the old crop without being identical. A season returns without restoring the previous year. A mourner remembers someone who cannot return in the ordinary sense. Cycles produce continuity without reversing time. Dumuzi fits naturally within such a world. His movement between realms does not erase death. It gives death a rhythm. That rhythm may have offered ancient communities a way to imagine absence as something structured rather than meaningless. Yet the emotional cost remains. Laments connected with Dumuzi preserve grief, separation, and longing. People did not need theology to make loss painful. The myths acknowledge that a divine schedule does not make departure easy. A cosmic rule does not make mourning less human. You hear a distant lament moving through the evening air. Its melody is low. Women may have sung ritual songs associated with Dumuzi in different periods and places, though the precise performance settings of surviving compositions remain a subject of scholarly discussion. The voice does not sound like philosophical argument. It sounds like absence made audible. That may be the most important counterweight to all the talk of cosmic order. Rules affect people. Assignments create grief. A substitution may restore balance without restoring fairness. From the perspective of the underworld, one presence replaces another. From the perspective of those who love Dumuzi, an irreplaceable person disappears. Ancient myth allows both truths to exist at once. You stand at the edge of a field as darkness settles over the soil. Nothing looks supernatural now. A shepherd gathers animal. A breeze carries the scent of reeds and dry grass. Somewhere beyond sight, the story imagines a god moving between worlds according to an arrangement larger than his wishes. His fate suggests that return is never merely a door opening. It may require exchange. It may demand substitution. It may divide time between incompatible realms. And perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that cosmic order can permit someone to come back while still insisting that the vacant place below must never remain empty. The question now becomes quieter and much more difficult. Could an ancient concept of destiny actually determine whether someone was allowed to return? The temptation to answer quickly is strong. Mesopotamian literature contains divine decrees, underworld regulations, restored life, substitutions, and extraordinary objects associated with cosmic authority. Placed together, those ideas seem almost designed to form a hidden system. Yet surviving texts demand caution. No known Mesopotamian tablet plainly states that the Tablet of Destinies served as a device for selecting dead individuals and authorizing their return to life. That sentence matters. Without it, all is again, can quietly harmful certainty. You sit beside an imagined table covered with clay fragments. Some pieces preserve complete lines, while others contain only a few damaged signs. A scholar tries to reconstruct what once stood between them. The work resembles assembling a shattered window, while several pieces remain permanently missing. This is how much ancient literature reaches the modern world. Researchers at institutions such as Yale University, the University of Oxford, and the University of Chicago compare manuscripts copied in different cities and periods. They examine vocabulary, grammar, scribal habits, parallel passages, and archaeological context. The method is slow. Certainty comes reluctantly. That caution becomes especially important when several different myths appear to share similar ideas. One text may describe divine destiny. Another may describe descent into the underworld. Another may present the restoration of a deity. A modern reader can connect them easily. The ancient scribes may not have connected them in the same way. Mesopotamian religion was never one perfectly organized theological manual. Traditions accumulated across centuries. Cities favored different gods. Stories changed. Older material could survive beside newer interpretations without anyone feeling required to solve every contradiction. The result is a religious landscape filled with overlapping systems rather than one universal doctrine. That makes the possibility of hidden connections intriguing but difficult to prove. Consider the language of destiny itself. Modern English often makes destiny sound like a fixed future waiting ahead. Mesopotamian concepts can include assigned roles, established decrees, divine decisions, and conditions determining proper order. A destiny may concern kingship. It may concern a city. It may concern a divine office. It may describe what a being has been appointed to do. This broader meaning allows an interesting possibility. If existence within the cosmic order depends partly upon assigned status, then returning from another realm could theoretically require a change in that status. Someone classified among the dead must once again belong among the living. The logic is coherent. The evidence remains indirect. You can hear the difference. A reasonable reconstruction says the ideas may fit together. An unsupported claim says an ancient tablet explicitly controlled resurrection. Only the first survives careful historical scrutiny. This distinction does not make the mystery less interesting. It makes it sharper. Ancient societies frequently imagined important transitions as changes of recognized status. Marriage changes social identity. Coronation changes political identity. Adoption changes family relationships. Enslavement or liberation changes legal position. Death changes nearly everything. Written records could preserve these transformations within human institutions. The divine realm could imagine similar transformations through decrees and judgments. Researchers studying Mesopotamian legal and administrative traditions have shown how strongly social identity could depend upon recognized categories. A person's obligations varied according to household, occupation, status, and institutional relationship. You were not simply an isolated individual. You occupied a place. This provides a useful comparison with mythic return. A dead person trying to rejoin the living world faces more than distance. That being must cross categories. The problem resembles a change of cosmic citizenship. The phrase is modern, of course, but the underlying idea fits surprisingly well. One realm claims the individual. Another realm may receive the individual only under proper conditions. A substitute may satisfy the first claim. A divine decree may alter the arrangement. An authorized exception may temporarily suspend the ordinary rule. None of these requires the Tablet of Destinies specifically. That absence is important. The tablet appears most clearly in stories concerning supreme command and legitimate authority. Underworld return stories usually emphasize other mechanisms. Judgment matters. Substitution matters. Divine assistance matters. Rules governing the Lufbeer realm are in. The traditions can illuminate each other without becoming identical. Scholars continue debating how systematically Mesopotamian thinkers connected their various myths. Some researchers emphasize shared theological structures visible across many compositions. Others warn that modern attempts to construct one unified system can impose consistency that ancient traditions never possessed. Both approaches have value. Patterns clearly exist. Perfect uniformity does not. That uncertainty leaves a narrow but fascinating space for interpretation. Perhaps the Tablet of Destinies represented the highest level of authority from which exception could theoretically be established. Perhaps it concerned cosmic sovereignty without any special role in returning the dead. Perhaps later storytellers understood its power differently across time. The clay remains silent on the most dramatic possibilities. A fringe tradition among modern alternative history writers takes a much stronger position. Some describe the tablet as a biological control device containing records of individuals, almost like a registry determining who could be restored after death. Others imagine it storing genetic information or consciousness patterns. These claims move far beyond surviving evidence. No archaeological discovery supports a Mesopotamian machine storing personalities or controlling resurrection. No excavated tablet contains instructions for such technology. The idea belongs to modern speculation. Still, its popularity reveals something about the ancient imagery. People sense a relationship between record-keeping and identity. That connection is not entirely invented. Mesopotamian cultures placed enormous importance upon names. A name could preserve memory. Royal inscriptions repeated names across monuments. Families remembered ancestors. Scribes recorded individuals within contracts and institutional accounts. To be named was to remain socially visible. This creates a strange imaginative bridge. If destiny determines one's recognized place, and names preserve identity, then a cosmic record could be imagined as holding something essential about belonging. The ancient texts stop short of saying this explicitly. Modern imagination continues walking. You can almost feel the cool clay beneath your fingertips as that boundary approaches. One side contains evidence, the other contains possibility. Responsible storytelling does not need to destroy possibility. It simply labels the border, so that border protects the ancient world from becoming whatever modern audiences wish it to be. It also preserves genuine mystery. There are questions scholars cannot answer because too much evidence has been lost. Libraries burned. Tablets shattered. Stories vanished when languages died. Entire traditions may have disappeared without leaving recoverable copies. Absence does not prove a hidden doctrine existed. Neither does it prove every lost idea resembled the surviving ones. History requires patience with uncertainties. Perhaps that is why the Tablet of Destinies remains so compelling. Its surviving roles are already extraordinary. It belongs to debates about kingship, decree, divine hierarchy, and cosmic order. It can be seized. Its possession has consequences. Its authority appears connected with determining conditions. Those features are enough. There is no need to force the tablet into a machine for resurrection. The quieter possibility is more interesting. Ancient Mesopotamians may have imagined existence itself as something governed by recognized relationships and divine decisions. To return from death would therefore mean more than restarting a body. It could require restoration to the category of the living. It could require release from one authority and acceptance by another. It could require the cosmic order to acknowledge that the person belongs again where breathing people stand beneath the sun. Whether the tablet of Destinies performed that function remains unknown. No surviving line gives you permission to say yes. No surviving line makes the broader question meaningless. And in the narrow space between evidence and imagination, the ancient mystery remains exactly where history is often most haunting. Not solved. Not dismiss! Simply waiting in clay, a cylinder seal rolls slowly across wet clay, leaving behind a procession of tiny figures, symbols, and carefully carved signs. The object fits easily inside a hand. Its impression can change what happens next. In Mesopotamian society, seals helped confirm identity, office, ownership, responsibility, and participation in important transactions. A mark pressed into clay could show that a person stood behind an agreement. The seal did not speak. Everyone understood what it meant. You can imagine an official receiving a tablet in a crowded administrative room. The document records grain, land, labour, or property. Witnesses stand nearby while the clay remains soft enough to accept an impression. Then the seal is rolled. The transaction acquires another layer of authority. Researchers at Yale University and the University of Chicago have studied thousands of such objects and impressions from Mesopotamian archaeological contexts. Their work shows that sealing practices developed alongside increasingly complex systems of administration. The images themselves could be beautiful. Gods appear seated upon thrones. Worshippers approach divine figures. Animals struggle. Heroes confront fantastic creatures. Yet the seal remains practical. It identifies. It confirms. It authorizes. That combination of symbolism and administration creates a useful window into Mesopotamian ideas about divine permission. A person could possess an object without possessing the authority represented by its seal. A tablet might physically exist while still requiring authentication. An order might be written correctly, yet remain questionable if nobody could establish who issued it. Identity mattered. Authorization mattered. Procedure mattered. The same cultural habits appear in religious life through rituals that establish who may approach sacred space, what materials may be used, and which actions must occur in which sequence. You smell wax smoke and crushed herbs as a ritual specialist prepares a small offering nearby. He does not improvise. Certain words belong with certain gestures. Certain substances belong with certain purposes. Certain participants must possess the proper ritual standing. Mesopotamian religious practice could be remarkably precise. Incantation tablets preserve detailed instructions concerning purification, protection, healing, omens, and communication with divine forces. The correct procedure does not guarantee that every ancient practitioner understood ritual identically. It does reveal a powerful cultural assumption. Access requires form. A person entering a restricted sacred space cannot simply announce sincere intentions and continue walking. Purification may be necessary. Appropriate clothing may matter. Timing may matter. Priestly status may matter. The threshold itself tells you that permission has structure. Temple architecture reinforces this feeling. Public areas give way to more restricted spaces. Courtyards lead toward chambers associated with a divine presence, where fewer people are permitted to enter. The closer one moves towards sacred authority, the more controlled access becomes. This is not unique to Mesopotamia. Still, Mesopotamian texts and archaeology preserve the principle with unusual richness. A divine household has doors. A palace has gates. An archive has custodians. An underworld has guardians. Every important system knows who belongs where. That pattern becomes especially interesting when names enter the picture. Mesopotamian names were more than convenient labels. They could preserve family relationships, divine devotion, social identity, and personal memory. A name spoken in ritual could identify exactly which person or being an action concerned. Ambiguity could be dangerous. The wrong name might mean the wrong target. The right name could establish recognition. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Oxford have examined how naming appears across legal texts, literary compositions, magical traditions, and royal inscriptions. One recurring feature is precision. People are identified through parentage, office, location, or other relationships when necessary. The administrative world dislikes confusion. The ritual world often dislikes it even more. You can sense why. A legal transfer needs the correct owner. A protective incantation needs the correct beneficiary. A royal inscription needs the correct king. A divine petition needs the correct deity. Names function like anchors. They tie actions to particular identities. This creates an intriguing possibility when thinking about return. If a being must cross from one recognized condition into another, identity must remain stable enough for the transition to matter. Who is returning? Who has authority over that person? Who confirms the change? A nameless figure becomes difficult to place inside any ordered system. A name figure can be recognized. This does not prove that Mesopotamians imagined a celestial registry controlling resurrection. The evidence does not support such certainty. Yet their culture repeatedly connects identity with record authority and recognition. A peculiar administrative tablet can make this point more vividly than any myth. Thousands of surviving records concern ordinary matters such as barley allocations or livestock counts. Many names belong to people who would otherwise have vanished completely from history. Their lives are mostly lost. Their names remain. A scribe preserving a ration list accidentally defeats oblivion for several thousand years. There is something quietly beautiful about that. The worker may have considered the tablet tedious. Modern historians consider it a voice. The written name allows someone forgotten by family, city, and kingdom to become visible again. Not alive, but recognized. That distinction is important. Memory can imitate return without becoming resurrection. A dead person enters conversation again when a name is read aloud. An ancient official becomes briefly present when you learn what he received or witnessed. Writing gives absence a form. This may help explain why records carry such emotional force across cultures. They hold proof that someone occupied a place in the world. Mesopotamian civilization understood the administrative value of that proof long before modern archives existed. The religious imagination could extend the principle further. Ritual texts sometimes identify troublesome spirits, petitioned gods, patients, household members, or ritual participants with careful specificity. Correct identification allows the ritual action to reach its intended destination. The rite has a target. The target has a name. The specialist has a role. The words follow an established procedure. Everything belongs somewhere. Scholars continue debating how far administrative metaphors should be used to interpret Mesopotamian religion. Some argue that temples and divine hierarchies strongly reflect earthly institutions. Others warn that sacred ideas cannot simply be reduced to bureaucracy. The gods are not officials wearing supernatural costumes. Religion also contains poetry, emotion, fear, devotion, mystery, and inherited tradition. Both perspectives deserve space. Administrative habits provide a language for understanding authority. They do not explain the whole spiritual world. One fringe interpretation imagines cylinder seals as ancient access devices, almost like coded keys connected with forgotten technologies. Their repeated imagery of gods, gates, and ritual scene encourages such speculation. Archaeological evidence offers a simpler explanation. Cylinder seals were carved objects used for identification, authentication, and display. They were sophisticated. They were not electronic. Still, the idea of controlled access remains genuinely ancient. The seal proves that a culture can invest a small object with authority because a larger system agrees to recognize it. That principle may be more important than any technological fantasy. You hold the imagined seal between your fingers. Without the society surrounding it, the object is simply carved stone. Inside the proper system, it changes outcomes. A storage room opens. A transaction becomes valid. An official accepts responsibility. A document carries recognized authority. Permission exists because relationships give the symbol meaning. The same logic may help explain why divine authority in Mesopotamian stories often depends upon offices, decrees, names, rights, and proper custody. Cosmic order is not portrayed as random power scattered everywhere. It is structured power. Who speaks matters. Who receives matters. Which gate opens matters. Which name is recognized matters. The details become almost ceremonial. A person crossing an ordinary city gate may need no great permission. A person crossing the boundary between divine realms may require an entirely different level of recognitions. You hear the cylinder seal roll once more across wet clay. The impression appears gradually, every carved line transferred into the soft surface. Nothing flashes or flashes. No voice speaks from heaven, yet the people standing nearby understand that a status has changed. An agreement now carries confirmation. Perhaps this is the quietest clue of all. Ancient Mesopotamians lived in a world where authority became real through recognized signs and proper procedures. If even human transactions required identification, witnesses, seals, and accepted forms, then a transition as extraordinary as returning from the realm of the dead could hardly be imagined as casual. Someone would have to be recognized. Someone would have to possess authority. Some boundary would have to acknowledge the change. And the mystery becomes less about opening a gate than about possessing the permission that makes the gatekeeper step aside. A faint scratch of reed against clay becomes the sound that fills the room. The scribe is not composing a heroic tale. He is making a list. Plants, stones, professions, cities, animals, vessels, tools, and divine names appear in careful sequence. Each entry seems modest, yet together they form something surprisingly ambitious. They turn the world into memory. Mesopotamian scribes preserved enormous collections of ordered knowledge because classification itself carried value. Their lists were copied across generations, sometimes preserving words long after ordinary speech had changed. Researchers at Yale University and the University of Oxford have examined these scholarly traditions as evidence for how ancient intellectuals organized knowledge. The records confirm an enduring scribal fascination with arranging reality into recognizable categories. A thing receives a name. The name receives a place. The place becomes part of a larger order. You can almost feel the calm satisfaction of the system. A stone is not simply lying in the landscape. It belongs among stones. A profession belongs among professions. A deity possesses titles, relationships, powers, and recognizable attributes. The universe becomes easier to understand when everything can be placed somewhere. This habit may offer another way to imagine the Tablet of Destinies. Perhaps the object was not merely a Sumerian associated with commands about future events. Perhaps it represented the deeper memory of how things had been assigned. That idea remains speculative. The surviving myths do not describe the tablet as an archive containing every individual history, yet the possibility emerges naturally from the surrounding cultures. Mesopotamian authority often depends upon knowing what has been established. A boundary dispute requires knowledge of an earlier agreement. A temple office depends upon inheritance. A royal claim may depend upon remembered legitimacy. A ritual depends upon preserved instructions. Memory keeps order from dissolving. Without memory, every decision becomes temporary. Imagine a king issuing a decree that nobody records. The words vanish. Officials remember fragments. Witnesses disagree. Years pass. The decision becomes vulnerable to argument. Written memory prevents that erosion. Clay gives permanence to what human minds might lose. Now imagine the same principle enlarged beyond human institutions. If divine order contains assigned roles, then some form of cosmic memory would preserve those assignments. Who governs storms? Who receives kingship? Which city belongs under which divine protection? Which beings occupy heaven? Which beings belong below? The questions are not trivial. They describe structure. A structure survives only if its relationships remain recognizable. The Tablet of Destinies could therefore be imagined as a concentrated symbol of remembered order. Not necessarily a list. Not necessarily a literal database. Something older and stranger. A divine guarantee that established conditions remain known. This interpretation changes the meaning of control. If the tablet remembers what something is supposed to be, then authority over the tablet might involve authority over restoration. A disrupted state could be compared with an established one. A displaced role could be returned. A broken order could be corrected. The idea resembles human administration without requiring hidden technology. A clerk restores a property claim by consulting an older document. A priest restores ritual order by following inherited instructions. A ruler restores an office by appointing the recognized successor. In each case, memory guides return. You feel the cool edge of a tablet beneath your thumb. Its marks do not move. That stillness is precisely the point. Memory remains when events have passed. The ancient scribe cannot stop time. He can prevent time from erasing a decision completely. There is something almost defiant about writing. A voice fades instantly. A mark waits. One quirky modern theory pushes this concept toward the idea of a universal memory device. Alternative writers sometimes imagine the Tablet of Destinies storing complete patterns for beings, objects, or even consciousness itself. In that interpretation, restoration becomes almost mechanical. Recover the pattern. Restore the being. The archaeological evidence does not support such a machine. No surviving Mesopotamian artifact has demonstrated storage technology of that kind. Still, the theory attaches itself to a genuine ancient concern. Identity requires continuity. If everything about a person vanished completely, what exactly could return? A body alone may not be enough. A name matters. Relationships matter. Status matters. Memory matters. Mesopotamian traditions understood remembrance as part of continued social existence. Kings carved names into monuments because fame could outlive flesh. Families maintained ancestral memory because the dead remained connected to household identities. Scribes copied ancient compositions because knowledge deserved survival. To remember was to resist disappearance. This creates a subtle bridge between record and return. A person who is remembered remains locatable within the social world. A forgotten person becomes harder to place. The distinction is not physical resurrection, yet emotionally it can feel like the difference between presence and erasure. You read an ancient name say aloud. For one moment, someone unheard for thousands of years enters human speech again. Nothing supernatural has happened. Yet absence has been disturbed. That experience may help explain why modern readers are drawn toward the idea of cosmic memory. If writing can recover a forgotten human name, perhaps divine writing could recover something greater. The ancient texts never state the idea so neatly. They leave fragments. Scholars continue debating how literally divine writing should be understood within Mesopotamian mythology. Some specialists emphasize the influence of scribal culture upon religious imagery. Others caution that divine tablets should not simply be reduced to enlarged administrative records. A sacred object can carry symbolic meanings that exceed its everyday model. The debate remains open because mythology transforms familiar objects into unfamiliar possibilities. A tablet ended in can be set as in clay. In divine hands, it becomes something far more difficult to define. This uncertainty is useful. It keeps the object suspended between document and symbol. If it were only a written list, its mystery would shrink. If it were treated as unexplained machinery, the evidence would disappear beneath modern fantasy. The more careful possibility lies between those extremes. The tablet may represent authoritative memory. It may preserve the idea that the universe possesses recognized arrangements which are not recreated from nothing every moment. Things have histories. Roles have origins. Statuses can be established and revoked. Restoration depends upon remembering what condition counts as proper. This becomes especially significant when the word return enters the picture. Return requires a reference point. You cannot return without somewhere, something, or some state toward which movement occurs. A traveller returns to a city because the city is known. A ruler returns to a throne because the office remains recognizable. A ritual restores purity because purity has an accepted meaning. A being returning from death would require an even deeper reference. What condition is being restored? Which identity returns? Which relationships become active again? Who recognizes the restored person? Without memory, these questions have no stable answers. Perhaps this is where destiny and memory quietly touch. Destiny establishes a condition. Memory preserves that condition. Authority determines whether it can be restored. The three ideas form a system without requiring the ancient scribes to describe one explicitly. You can imagine a divine archive that does not contain endless shelves. Its records might exist symbolically within decrees, names, offices, and sacred relationships. The Tablet of Destinies would then represent the highest concentration of that order. Not a prediction of every footstep, not a calendar of unavoidable events, a memory of what belongs where. The room grows darker around the scribe. His list continues beneath the fading light. One more sign appears. Then another. He may be tired. He may be bored. He may have no idea that someone thousands of years later will study his careful repetition. Yet his work survives because clay remembers pressure. That simple physical fact becomes almost poetic. The hand disappears. The mark remains. Perhaps ancient people saw something equally profound in divine authority. A decree may outlive the moment of speaking. An assignment may survive disruption. An identity may remain recognizable even after movement into another realm. And if the Tablet of Destinies represented the memory of such assignments, then its deepest power may have been quieter than prophecy. It may have preserved the pattern to which order could return. In that possibility, Destiny becomes less like a road leading forward and more like an ancient record waiting in darkness, remembering where every being once belonged. A modern screen glows in the darkness, displaying an ancient clay tablet beside claims the original scribe would scarcely recognize. The captions speak confidently. They describe forgotten machines, hidden laboratories, engineered humans, and devices capable of controlling death itself. The Tablet of Destinies has become something new within modern imagination. It's no longer only a record object from Mesopotamian mythology. For some readers, it becomes evidence. You encounter claims that the tablet stored biological information, contained instructions for rebuilding bodies, or granted access to technology left by a vanished civilization. Other interpretations imagine a device capable of changing physical reality through spoken commands. Some go further still. They suggest that whoever possessed the tablet could decide which beings returned from death and which remained permanently excluded. The ideas are memorable. The evidence is another matter. Archaeologists have excavated Mesopotamian cities for more than a century and recovered enormous quantities of material culture. Temples, houses, workshops, graves, weapons, tools, seals, statues, tablets, jewellery, and irrigation systems reveal societies of extraordinary complexity. Researchers at the University of Chicago, Yale University, the University of Pennsylvania, and the University of Oxford continue studying these remains. Nothing discovered so far demonstrates the existence of machines capable of restoring dead bodies, reversing matter, or storing consciousness. That does not make ancient Mesopotamia primitive. Quite the opposite. Its achievements become more impressive when they are understood within the technologies people actually developed. Scribes created durable systems of writing. Surveyors measured and feel. Engineers controlled water through canals. Metalworkers mastered alloys and casting. Builders raised monumental structures from mud brick. Administrators managed institutions containing enormous quantities of food, labour, animals, and land. These accomplishments required intelligence, organisation, and generations of accumulated knowledge. They do not require a lost technological civilization hiding behind them. Still, fringe interpretations thrive because ancient texts contain images that sound strangely familiar when translated into modern language. A command changes an object's condition. A sacred tablet grants authority. A god restores something that disappeared. A dead deity returns under special circumstances. To a modern reader surrounded by software, medical technology, and stored information, the comparison can feel irresistible. Your own world shapes the metaphors you notice. A 19th century reader might compare the Tablet of Destinies with a royal charter. A 21st century reader may imagine a control interface. Neither comparison proves what the ancient object literally was. Both reveal the assumptions of the observer. This is one reason historians treat modern analogies carefully. An analogy can illuminate. It can also smuggle conclusions into the evidence. Suppose a text describes a divine command that causes a weapon to lose its completed form. You might compare the scene with the machine receiving instructions. The comparison helps you imagine structured control. Then, almost unnoticed, the comparison becomes a claim that an actual machine existed. One step has become two. Evidence has become invention. This happens frequently in alternative history. A genuine mystery provides the opening. Modern speculation fills the gap. Soon the speculation is repeated so often that it begins to sound like an ancient statement. The original tablet says far less. Scholars working directly with cuneiform texts often face precisely the opposite problem. They must resist saying more than the damaged evidence permits. A broken sign can alter a translation. A missing line can remove context. A word may carry several possible meanings. Different manuscripts may preserve different versions. The uncertainty can be frustrating. It is also honest, as one open scholarly debate concerns how Mesopotamian audiences themselves understood divine objects such as the Tablet of Destinies. Was the tablet imagined primarily as a physical object within narrative space? Did it function mainly as a symbol of kingship? Did it embody divine decrees? Did different scribal communities emphasize different meanings? Specialists continue discussing these possibilities because the surviving evidence supports complexity rather than one universal answer. That scholarly uncertainty is sometimes mistaken for weakness. It's actually one of the strengths of historical method. Saying that evidence is incomplete does not mean every explanation becomes equally probable. A missing answer does not automatically support the most extraordinary possibility. If archaeologists have found thousands of ordinary clay tablets and no advanced machines, the balance of evidence remains important. You can still enjoy the unsettling interpretation. You simply recognize where history ends and imagination begins. There is another reason lost civilization theories remain attractive. They restore wonder. Modern people often encounter ancient Mesopotamia through photographs of broken walls and museum cases filled with small brown tablets. The reality can appear quiet. Then someone proposes hidden technology, and suddenly the ruins seem charged with secrets. Yet the historical world needs no artificial mystery. Imagine inventing a writing system that allows speech to survive its speaker. Imagine organizing a city containing tens of thousands of people without electricity, engines, or modern communication. Imagine predicting celestial patterns through generations of observation. Imagine maintaining canal systems across landscapes where one neglected channel could threaten entire communities. That world is astonishing already. Its people do not become more interesting by pretending they possess modern machines. They become less visible. Their actual intelligence disappears behind imagined technology. The same problem affects claims about resurrection control. Mesopotamian stories certainly contain returns from death, underworld journeys, substitutions, and divine restoration. These themes are real, yet the stories usually present return through divine authority, ritual logic, substitution, or exceptional intervention. They do not describe laboratories reconstructing bodies from stored information. The difference matters. A myth can explore the boundaries of death without secretly describing medicine. Ancient people knew that death was final in ordinary human experience. Their stories became spaces where that finality could be questioned. What if a goddess returned? What if someone could substitute for another? What if divine authority could reverse an impossible condition? Those questions are powerful precisely because ordinary humans could not accomplish them. One quirky modern read even imagines the gods as administrators of a population whose births and deaths were centrally controlled. The Tablet of Destinies becomes a registry determining who remained active within the world. It is imaginative. No surviving Mesopotamian document describes such a population management system. Still, the theory accidentally notices something authentic. Ancient mythology often portrays existence as ordered. Gods assign roles. Judgments establish conditions. Boundaries separate realms. Permission matters. The mistake is not noticing the pattern. The mistake is insisting that the pattern must describe technology. You step mentally into a museum gallery where the tablets sit beneath soft light. They look unimpressive at first. Small pieces of clay, cracked surfaces, lines that resemble tiny bird tracks. Then you remember what they contain. Contracts, prayers, mathematical exercises, medical observations, royal boasts, myths about creation and death, letters written by people complaining about deliveries, debts, and family problems. Humanity becomes recognizable again. Perhaps the strangest fringe interpretation is therefore the one that removes humans entirely. Some lost civilization theories imagine that Mesopotamian achievements were inherited from mysterious outsiders because ordinary ancient people supposedly could not have created them. Archaeology tells a different story. Development appears gradually. Early villages grow. Administrative techniques become more complex. Writing evolves. Cities expand. Craft traditions improve over generations. The evidence shows continuity rather than sudden arrival from nowhere. That slow development may feel less dramatic. It is far more profound. Civilization emerges through countless ordinary decisions repeated across centuries. A canal is repaired. A child learns signs. A potter improves a kiln. A ruler builds a wall. A priest copies an old hymn. Knowledge accumulates quietly. The hidden truth is not necessarily that someone gave a civilization to humanity. Perhaps the hidden truth is how much humans achieved without anyone giving it to them. And the tablet of Destinies remains powerful precisely because it belongs to that human achievement. It reveals how ancient people imagined authority, memory, identity, death, and cosmic order through the familiar object of written clay. You do not need to call it a machine. You do not need to dismiss its mystery either. Somewhere between those extremes rests a more compelling possibility. The ancient scribes may have been asking whether existence itself depends upon being recognized within an ordered universe. That question survives every failed technological theory. It survives every damaged tablet. It survives because it is still yours. Night settles over the museum gallery, and the surviving tablets seem smaller than the ideas pressed into them. Behind glass, cracked pieces of clay rest beneath gentle light. Their edges are irregular, their surfaces crowded with signs made by scribes who expected other ancient readers. You stand quietly among them. Nothing moves. Yet the question hidden inside these texts feels strangely alive. What if destiny meant more than the future? The modern imagination tends to picture destiny as a road stretching forward. Somewhere ahead waits an event already decided, invisible but unavoidable. Mesopotamian traditions allow something broader. Destiny can involve rank, function, condition, authority, and the place assigned to something inside an ordered world. That difference quietly changes the mystery. A future tells you what comes next. An assigned order tells you what belongs. You look again at the clay. The tablet of Destinies appears in literature surrounding supreme authority, divine command, and the establishment of legitimate conditions. It is not described as a simple diary of tomorrow, nor does any surviving text provide a neat instruction manual explaining everything it could accomplish. Apparently the ancient gods were not thoughtful enough to leave technical documentation for curious modern viewers. Perhaps that is fortunate. Mystery survives where explanation fails. Mainstream scholarship remains clear about one important point. Archaeological evidence confirms that Mesopotamian communities treated writing, seals, decrees, offices, and recorded decisions as essential instruments of organized society. Researchers at institutions such as Yale University, the University of Chicago, the University of Pennsylvania, and the University of Oxford continue examining how these habits shaped religious imagination. Human authority became visible through documents. Divine authority could be imagined similarly, although on a scale reaching far beyond fields, debts, and royal appointments. A divine decree might establish a king, it might assign a god, it might determine the standing of a city, it might fix boundaries that ordinary humans could not alter. The tablet of Destinies belongs inside this language of established order. Perhaps its deepest mystery concerns restoration. You hear the faint imagined sound of a stylus pressing wet clay. A decision becomes permanent enough to survive the moment. If something later changes, the record preserves knowledge of the recognized state. A field can be restored to an owner, An office can be returned to a legitimate holder. A ritual can restore a disturbed relationship. The principle is familiar. Restoration requires memory. You cannot restore what has no remembered condition. That thought becomes more unsettling when applied to existence itself. If a person moves from the condition of living into the condition of dead, returning would demand more than physical movement. The person's recognized place would need to change. One realm would lose its claim. Another would receive the individual again. Some authority would have to recognize the transition. Perhaps ancient mythology imagined such changes through divine judgment rather than through a single sacred object. The surviving evidence certainly supports that caution. Yet the Tablet of Destinies remains associated with the highest levels of command, which keeps the broader possibility open. Could authority over destiny include authority over restoration? Scholars do not possess a final answer. Some interpret the tablet primarily through divine kingship and political legitimacy. Others emphasize decree, cosmic organization, or the symbolism of written authority. There is also continuing debate about how much consistency should be expected across texts produced in different cities and centuries. Ancient Mesopotamia contained no single theological office issuing corrected editions of every myth. Traditions overlapped. They disagreed. They changed. That complexity makes certainty difficult. It also makes the surviving pattern more intriguing. Again and again, existence appears organized through relationships. Things belong somewhere. Gods hold offices. Cities possess divine patrons. Kings require legitimacy. The dead occupy another domain. Return, therefore, becomes a problem of placement. Perhaps the person who returns is not simply moving upward through a gate. Perhaps that the large order must recognize that the person that belongs among the living once more. That possibility does not require advanced machinery. It requires something ancient societies understood very well: permission. One fringe interpretation imagines the Tablet of Destinies as a cosmic registry containing the original identities of beings and allowing authorized restoration. There is no archaeological evidence for such a device. No excavated tablet records instructions for rebuilding the dead through hidden technologies. Still, the theory grows from a real ancient tension. Identity and authority repeatedly meet inside Mesopotamian texts. A name identifies, a decree establishes, a seal confirms, a judgment changes status, a ritual restores. These are ordinary actions until mythology enlarges them beyond human limits. Then a divine command can affect creation itself. You leave the display case and imagine the clay returning to the environment from which it came. Once, it was river mud. Then someone shaped it. A scribe pressed signs into its surface. A palace or temple preserved it. A collapse buried it. Centuries passed. Archaeologists uncovered it. Scholars read it. Now its meaning travels through your thoughts. The tablet itself has undergone many kinds of return, and it returned from burial. It returned to language. It returned to human attention. Yet none of these returns restored the world that created it. The ancient city remains gone. The scribe remains unnamed. The original audience cannot explain what the symbols meant to them. History restores fragments, never everything. Perhaps that incompleteness is appropriate. The Tablet of Destinies belongs to a civilization deeply concerned with maintaining order in a landscape where order was never guaranteed. Rivers changed course, canals filled with filth. Kings died. Dynasties collapsed. Cities were abandoned. Temples became ruins. Against that instability, writing offered resistance. A mark could survive the hand. A decree could survive the speaker. A name could survive the body. The idea of destiny may have offered something similar on a cosmic level. An established order could survive disruption because authority remembered what belonged where. If that interpretation contains even a small part of the ancient idea, then return becomes less mysterious and more profound. Someone could return because the universe still recognized a place for them. Something could be restored because its proper condition had not been forgotten. A disrupted arrangement could be repaired because the pattern remained known. This is not proof, it is possibility, and possibility is sometimes where ancient history becomes most intimate. You stand beneath the fading museum lights while the clay waits stagnantly behind glass. No inscription whispers an answer, no hidden mechanism awakens. There is only writing, broken by time and stubbornly surviving. Perhaps the tablet of Destinies never controlled resurrection. Perhaps it represented sovereignty in ways modern categories cannot completely recover. Or perhaps the surviving myths preserve a larger idea whose full structure has disappeared with lost libraries and forgotten schools. The door remains sealed, not because evidence proves something extraordinary beyond it, but because the evidence refuses to close every possibility. And perhaps the most haunting possibility is also the quietest. Destiny may never have meant simply knowing where everything was going. It may have meant knowing where everything was permitted to belong. The gallery grows dimmer now, and the sharp edges of the tablets soften beneath the final pools of light. You no longer need to solve them. The clay has waited thousands of years without demanding certainty, and it can wait quietly a little longer. Outside, evening settles over streets, rooftops, gardens, and distant roads beneath the sky the ancient scribes would still recognize. The same stars continue their slow movement. The rivers are different, the cities are different. Yet human beings still wonder whether life follows an order larger than anything they can see. Perhaps that question is enough. You can allow the names of Enlil, Ninurta, Inanna, Dumuzi, Marduk, and the forgotten scribes to drift gently away. Their temples return to silence, their courtyards empty. The oil lamps fade. Dust settles again upon mud brick walls, somewhere beneath layers of earth. Another fragment may still remain unread, holding a few signs that could change how one ancient story is understood, or perhaps nothing more will appear. History offers no promise. It gives fragments, possibilities, and the quiet discipline of uncertainty. Your breathing becomes slower as the imagined museum disappears. The clay returns to darkness. The unanswered question can remain there with it. Perhaps destiny was a decree. Perhaps it was an office. Perhaps it was the memory of proper order. Perhaps return required nothing more mysterious than permission from powers ancient people believed governed the boundaries of existence. You do not need to choose tonight. The oldest stories rarely surrender all their meanings at once. And perhaps, beneath the silence of broken tablets and vanished cities, the story is not yet complete. Good night.